Chapter 1160. Great Creator, are you finally back? Who is this guy? Your servant? Lawrence's slightly strange voice quickly reverberated in the depths of their minds. After a period of learning and observation, he was no longer as naive as he was when he was first born. He gradually began to have his own thoughts and cognition. Zhang Cheng smiled and nodded. That's right, it's me. The one next to me is my servant. Tell me, how have you been recently? Have you learned a lot of interesting things? Uh-huh. Of course I've learned a lot. Do you see those interesting life forms under the tree? I've given them enlightenment, allowing them to learn how to use tools and communicate with gestures and voices. Perhaps it won't be long before they establish a civilization completely different from those who call themselves humans outside. Ellens, who had his memories forcibly wiped, was like a child, happily reporting the small results he had obtained. He was completely unaware that his every move had been closely monitored, and everything had been within the plan from the beginning to the end. Well done. I'm glad that you've grown. Now, I have a difficult task for you. Zhang Cheng pointed at the woman who was still in a deep coma. From now on, you have to weave a dreamscape in her mind, a beautiful dreamscape, and at the same time, awaken another personality in her subconscious. Tell me, are you sure you can do it? Is this a challenge? Island's voice revealed a hint of excitement. If you think so, then so be it. But don't forget, don't make any mistakes. This woman is very important to me. Very, very important. Zhang Cheng said in a serious tone. Understood. I promise. After saying this, a massive wave of spiritual energy enveloped the naked half-human, half-god woman. It started to weave a false dream in her mind, and then it went deeper bit by bit until it dug out the secret hidden in the deepest part of her memory. Admiring the woman's expression, Zhang Cheng narrowed his mouth and revealed a meaningful expression. He turned to Isolt, whose expression was constantly changing, and asked, Do you know what I'm going to do? No, I don't know. Isolt shook his head cautiously. I don't know. I think the way this fruit speaks sounds familiar. Hee, you noticed it too? But don't say it out loud, or I'll be very angry. Zhang Cheng didn't hide his threat. As a smart man, Isolt naturally wouldn't choose to take a huge risk just for momentary gratification. He decisively promised, I swear that I don't know anything. I didn't see or hear anything. I like your cleverness, and I hope you can continue to keep this cleverness. You can leave now. I still have some important matters to deal with alone. Zhang Cheng waved his hand directly, indicating that he could leave. As you wish, great master. Isolt knelt on one knee and bowed solemnly. Today, he finally realized how terrifying the mysterious man in front of him, who never got angry or yelled at his servants, was. That kind of terror wasn't just madness, slaughter, brutality, and death. There was also something deeper that he couldn't understand. Watching the old man's back gradually disappear at the end of the leafy vines, Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and muttered to himself, I hope this guy doesn't do anything stupid. I don't have many chess pieces that I can use now. As soon as his voice trailed off, he raised his hands high and injected energy and soul into this huge chaos tree, including his own dark will. He desired to forge this planet into a weapon, a powerful weapon that belonged only to him. At the same time, at the end of the distant universe, Gru and the other sovereigns of the Chaos faction were carefully observing Zhang Cheng's every move through an unknown ring device. As true eternal beings, they didn't need to absorb energy or rest. They just stared at the scene before them. After an unknown amount of time, a sovereign who looked like a rock suddenly asked, Can any of you see what he's trying to do? Especially that tree. It has an inexplicable sense of vigilance whenever it sees me. I don't know. After all, he comes from the three-dimensional space. Whether it's his way of thinking or his understanding of the universe, he's different from us life forms who were born in the high-dimensional universe. Under normal circumstances, it's absolutely impossible for a sovereign to be born in the three-dimensional universe. This is because the life forms that live there are too low-level and suffer the most restrictions. They can't even observe the shadows of the high-dimensional universe. But what's interesting is that two sovereigns were born at once this time, and there his parallel universe selves. With such a coincidence, there must be some secret behind me that we haven't discovered yet. Another hegemon with a large stature expressed his opinion without hesitation. What puzzles me the most is that he's actually using some obscure means to control the natives of that planet, instead of directly using pure power to conquer and transform them. Another sovereign raised his doubts. I think I can give you an explanation about this. Gru took the initiative to step forward, waving his insect-like upper limbs. On his home planet, a very interesting form of society was born. It's a society where power and wealth influence each other, very similar to the natives of this planet. Perhaps it's because of this that he feels like he's returned to his hometown, so he decided to play a little game. You mean, those seemingly meaningless actions of his are actually a form of interest and a way to pass the time? That's right. Pay attention to remembering what he has done since his arrival. Whenever it's a critical moment, he'll choose to prioritize the plan and resolutely eliminate the targets that threaten the plan. I see. As long as we eliminate those seemingly meaningless actions, we can analyze the secrets hidden behind the chaos and disorder. I think the most important thing is still that tree and the fruit that grows on it. I don't know why, but I keep having a bad feeling about this. Damn it, if only he wasn't a sovereign, we'd be able to see through time and space to spy on the infinite possibilities. No matter how many there are, we'll always be able to find one or two that have the highest possibility. As the sovereigns of the Chaos faction engaged in a heated discussion, one of the sovereigns of the Order faction had silently arrived at a place less than a light year away from the planet. Looking at the giant chaos tree that was about to penetrate the atmosphere from afar, he couldn't help but sneer and mock. What an ugly creation. Looks like he's right. This kind of threat must be eliminated while it's still in the bud. Chapter 1161. Asterisk boom. Asterisk accompanied by a deafening boom. A villager in a remote mountain village at the border of the kingdom witnessed with his own eyes one or two gigantic silver light balls drawing an arc in the sky before crashing heavily onto a hillside more than 10 kilometers away. The tremendous impact and vibration even caused a terrifying landslide. 1/3 of the hilltop was shattered and fractured at an unbelievable speed. Such a doomsday-like scene, not to mention a group of villagers who had never seen the world. Even those knowledgeable scholars would be dumbfounded and rooted to the spot. Affected by the vibration, a few dilapidated old houses in the village directly collapsed. The domestic animals were also frightened and kept screaming. Fortunately, as most people came to the open space to see the balls of light falling from the sky, no one was injured. As the oldest person in the village with the highest prestige, the old village chief tried his best to open his eyes wide, trying to observe the situation through the dust in the sky. For some reason, he suddenly had a strong, ominous premonition. The balls of light falling from the sky could bring an unimaginable disaster to the village. Chief, do we need to send a few people over to take a look? Who knows, there might be some treasures. A young man could not hold back the excitement in his heart as he suggested. Like most people of the same age, this young man, who was not even 18 years old, had all sorts of adventure stories in his head. He was extremely eager to one day obtain the power to leave the place where he was born and venture into the outside world. And to do so, one must first have enough money, or at least be able to buy a set of armor and weapons necessary for an adventurer. Normally, to a farmer, whether it was iron weapons or armor, they were all undeniably luxuries. Even if one did not eat or drink for 3 to 5 years, they might not be able to afford the cheapest set. But now a golden opportunity was right in front of them. As long as they could get their hands on that thing that fell from the sky, no matter what it would definitely attract the interest of the nobles in the nearby castles. They might even be able to exchange it for a large sum of money. No, don't go. It's dangerous that day. The old village chief refused without hesitation. This was because compared to the young, the old were always more conservative and unwilling to take any risks. Due to this reason, most of the time, the power of the entire society was concentrated in the hands of the elderly. Only they could ensure stability and balance. When the young were in power, society would often become turbulent and radical. But things that fall from the sky could be worth a lot of money. It's enough to get us out of poverty, the young man argued excitedly. Child, remember, nothing in this world is more important than life. You saw opportunities and wealth from that ball of light, but I felt the opposite. I felt danger descending. The old man looked into the young man's eyes as he spoke, hoping to dispel the young man's unrealistic delusions. Unfortunately, the biggest characteristic of young people was their rebelliousness. They were unwilling to accept the experience imparted to them by their elders. They were more willing to use their own feet to explore the whole world bit by bit, even if it meant that they would end up badly bruised. The youth didn't even bother to continue arguing with the old village chief. He turned around and gave a look to his good friend. Then, he took 2 pitchforks as weapons to defend himself. He sneakily climbed over the wall and ran towards the distant hillside. When they arrived at their destination, they were shocked speechless by the huge crater in front of them. This crater wasn't like an ordinary crater, which was a hemispherical concave surface. Instead, it was like a cave formed by a thick and long stick that was fiercely inserted into the ground. The cross-section of the crater was less than 20 meters, but the depth was so deep that it couldn't be seen with the naked eye. In the deepest part of the cave, they could vaguely see a silver light constantly shining. Damn it, I think we should go down and take a look. Did any of you bring a rope? The young man, who felt his heart beating wildly, licked his lips and turned around to ask his companions. Of course, buddy, we are determined to be glorious adventurers. How could we forget to bring a rope? The other young man didn't say anything else. He took off the thick and long hemp rope hanging around his neck and tied one end to a stone that weighed dozens of tons. Just as he was about to tie the end of the rope to his waist and investigate the drilling hole, the ball of silver light suddenly jumped out from inside. In the next second, bang, a living young man exploded into blood and minced meat that filled the sky just like that. There was no need to ask. He was directly smashed into pieces by the silver ball of light. Before the rest of the young men could react, the silver ball of light finally revealed its true appearance. It was a shadow that was wrapped in energy. In the middle, one could vaguely distinguish 2 terrifying eyes. What a primitive and backward place. The most important thing is that this place is filled with the disgusting smell of chaos. This planet should be purified by the power of order. Accompanied by a cold whisper, he finally noticed the young men around him were trembling in fear, and the minced meat scattered on the ground. Some lower life forms. Maybe I can get some information from their memories. As he said that, the light around the black shadow's body quickly expanded and enveloped the few young men who were lucky enough to survive. After about 2 to 3 seconds, he returned to his original state and walked straight into the dense forest. As for the young men, they had long become idiots and fools with dull eyes and drooling nonstop. There was no need to ask. The rough memory reading had permanently damaged their brains and souls. Risks were always accompanied by opportunities. However, most people's nature determined that they only selectively saw opportunities and ignored the dangers. It was like buying a lottery ticket. There was only a 1 in 10 million chance of becoming rich overnight, but everyone who chose to buy it felt that they were the lucky one. At the same time, Zhang Cheng, who was sitting on a chair on the top floor of the magic tower, suddenly opened his eyes and laughed excitedly. Ha ha ha! It's here! It's finally here! The first ruler whose intentions are unknown. He didn't hide his identity, nor did he hide his strong hostility. Let me use you to test the power of my trump cards. As soon as he finished speaking, he directly tore open a passage and arrived below the Tree of Chaos. He stood still and looked into the distance. If nothing unexpected happened, this was the battlefield where the 2 of them would fight. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1162. A distance of a few hundred kilometers might take a normal person dozens of days, or even a few months to walk. But for a dominator who did not need to rest, a few days was enough. For some reason, this ruler who descended from the sky didn't use any abilities. Instead, he stepped on the ground step by step. Wherever he passed, whether it was the city or the passers-by he encountered, they all turned into lunatics or idiots in front of his incredible power. From a certain point of view, he was indeed a walking disaster. Fortunately, his way of walking completely followed the law of shortest straight line between 2 points. Whether it was mountains, lakes, forests, or swamps, there was not even a slight deviation. When he arrived at the Tree of Chaos, Zhang Cheng, who had been waiting for many days, was the first to greet him. "Welcome. Welcome to my planet." "Oh, you know me?" The unknown dominator slowly left the protection of the silver light, revealing a deformed body. He had a head as large as a baby's, and his eyes were light gray. His body and limbs were shriveled and thin, like a corpse that had evaporated all the water in it. "No, I don't know you, but I can feel the power of order from your body. If I'm not wrong, you should be here to ruin my plan, right?" Zhang Cheng replied with a faint smile. "Sitara, you can call me Sitara. As you can see, I am a dominator who believes that order will eventually replace chaos, and I'm also a member of the Order Parliament. In our eyes, you are an unmistakable threat, so now I want to eliminate this threat before it sprouts." The Overlord, who called himself Sitara, introduced himself and bowed politely. Needless to say, he had learned this etiquette from the thoughts and memories of those innocent people, so it looked very natural without a hint of awkwardness or awkwardness. "Eliminate the threat in the bud? Do you mean to kill me?" Zhang Cheng asked with great interest. The look in his eyes didn't seem to be asking about his life or death, but discussing an interesting research topic. "Kill you? No, no, no. That will lead to an all-out war between us and the Chaos faction. That is not the result the Parliament wants. Moreover, killing a dominator is not as easy as you think. I only need to defeat you, and then temporarily seal you." When he said this, Sitara's tone was relaxed and happy, without a hint of nervousness. Perhaps in his eyes, killing a new dominator was a piece of cake. "I see. Then what are you waiting for? Why don't you make your move?" Zhang Cheng pursed his lips, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. But Sitara shook his head calmly. "Don't rush. Before we make our move, let's get to know each other. After all, there are only so many sovereigns in this universe. Perhaps one day, you will join us. Your way of thinking and logic is really strange, so strange that I can't understand it." A strange expression appeared on Zhang Cheng's face. He could not imagine what kind of environment could give birth to such strange and abnormal values. In his eyes, the best way to deal with an enemy was to completely destroy their body and mind, and not just defeat them, seal them, and wait for years to come out for revenge. But Sitara obviously did not agree with this. He stared with his ridiculously large eyes and explained with a smile, "You are still too young. You have just entered this field not long ago. The backward concept of the three-dimensional universe is still affecting you. It is not strange that you cannot understand our way of thinking. But it will not take long for you to understand that in this small circle, what really affects the relationship between each other is not emotions and desires, but factions and beliefs. You may think of us as a bunch of idealists through and through, and idealists are fickle." That sounds like an excuse. Zhang Cheng was not someone who could be easily convinced, and he would not change his mind because of few words. Especially when it came from an opponent or enemy, he would be extremely vigilant. As for those idiots who easily changed their stance, no matter how powerful they would become pawns controlled by others. "Well, it seems like you can't get rid of those ignorant, backward, and primitive ideas for the time being. But it doesn't matter. You will understand one day. Now, let's end this quickly." With that, Sitara merged himself into the silver light again, and then charged forward like a cannonball. There were not too many fancy techniques, and there were not too many complicated and profound uses. There was only the simplest and most direct energy impact. Energy that contains order? Interesting. But this alone is not enough to stop me. Zhang Cheng muttered softly, and instantly created an energy shield that was the opposite of his opponent's, containing chaos. The moment the two collided, the entire world was overshadowed, light, resplendent, and gorgeous, like the shattering of stars. It was as if the universe in an infinite loop had returned to its origin, and then exploded again, spraying energy and matter in all directions. At this moment, any adjectives were pale and powerless and could not even describe 1/10,000th of the spectacular scene. Excellent defense. Looks like you are much stronger than I thought, and you have already begun to understand the source of the Dominator's power. Satara was pushed into the air by the terrifying reaction, and his voice was full of surprise and praise. The silver light that surrounded his body seemed to have consumed a lot of energy in the collision, and it was obviously smaller. There was no doubt that this shield-like energy was not infinite and could not be created at will. What, is that all you have? That's really disappointing. Zhang Cheng mocked without batting an eyelid. Unfortunately, Satara was not angered at all, nor did he lose his mind. Instead, he smiled and waved his hand. Don't use such boring tricks on me. Although there are no lack of extreme lunatics and egomaniacs among the Dominators, no one will lose their mind because of this. Because the situation of our existence has determined that no matter when, no matter what happens, the Dominators must maintain absolute rationality, or the entire universe will be in chaos. Moreover, I don't want to destroy this planet, or even this star field. Chapter 1163. You think this planet is easy to destroy? Zhang Cheng pursed his lips into a playful smile. In the past, crushing a planet would be as easy as moving a finger for a juggernaut. However, as the tree of chaos took root here and became one with the planet, any external force that wanted to destroy it would have to fight against the chaotic forces that spread throughout every corner of the universe. The juggernaut might be very powerful, but he was still the controller of the rules and not the creator. Therefore, he was not worried that the planet under his feet would be destroyed in a battle. Satara glanced meaningfully at the trunk of the towering tree not far away and replied without batting an eyelid, "No, I don't mean to look down on you. At least after the collision just now, I have already regarded you as an opponent of the same level as me. However, you don't seem to understand that for a juggernaut, true power doesn't come from the outside, but from the inside." So? Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows subconsciously. So you've wasted too much energy on these external things and neglected to tap into your own potential. Soon, I'll let you understand that even between juggernauts, there's a huge difference. As soon as he finished speaking, Satara suddenly stretched out his bony right hand and aimed at the tree of chaos in the distance. A dazzling green light shot out. The next second, boom, a large section of the fort part of the tree trunk broke on the spot and fell from a height of tens of thousands of meters. It crashed heavily on the ground, causing violent tremors and noises. Pain, screams, wails. It should be known that the tree of chaos was not just a tree. It was a living being with simple thoughts and a soul. Therefore, after it was severely injured, it immediately caused unimaginable chaos. Wherever the roots affected, no matter if it was a twisted beast or a creature that had gained initial intelligence, they all began to panic and flee in all directions. Large amounts of mental shock waves constantly spread through the air. The slightest carelessness would cause them to vomit blood and fall straight to the ground. Large amounts of dark red blood flowed out of their eyes, noses, and ears. If someone were to cut open the brains of the corpses at this time, they would find that their brains had all been squashed by some invisible force and turned into a mud-like paste. How is it? Do you realize the gap between us now? Satara's tone was filled with pride and confidence. As the ruler of light of the Order Parliament, his ability was very unique, which was why he was sent to carry out this dangerous mission. Even if they were surrounded and attacked by chaos hegemons, they would be able to easily escape. As for fighting against the forces of chaos, perhaps the other rulers of the Order faction would have a headache, but Sui Xiong definitely wouldn't. On the contrary, his ability was to restrain chaos. He could destroy all chaos forces in a short period of time and establish absolute order in the corresponding area. Sensing the intense emotions transmitted by the chaos tree through their spiritual connection, Zhang Cheng's countenance instantly turned grim. At the same time, a unique energy gushed toward his opponent. You made a mistake. You shouldn't have appeared in front of me. Do you know? In truth, it wasn't that sovereigns couldn't be killed. It was just that some sovereigns weren't willing to bear the consequences. But I'm different. I don't care about the consequences. If anyone angers me, even if I have to destroy the entire universe, I'll make them pay the price. The price is blood and death. Ah, you're angry. Then let me see how far you can go when you don't care about anything. Satara placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. At the same time, he didn't forget to make an inviting gesture. Don't be hasty. You'll soon understand the consequences of your arrogance and conceit. Zhang Cheng stared at his opponent as he began to merge himself with the Book of Chaos. When his body completely disappeared, the heavily damaged tree seemed to have obtained some sort of regenerative power and recovered at a speed visible to the naked eye. Apart from that, the area under Satara's feet that was enveloped in energy suddenly sprouted strangely colored vines. No matter how he struggled and released those destructive energies, in the end, he couldn't harm the vines at all. What was even more terrifying was that these vines were getting closer and closer. Some of them had barbs that pierced through his skin and absorbed energy from within. Damn it! What the hell is this? Satara finally panicked a little and began to ask loudly. What is this? No, it's not a thing. It's a weapon that I specially designed to deal with sovereigns like you. Actually, a long time ago, I wanted to see if I could strip the laws of the main chords from a ruler's body and soul bit by bit. Would that ruler die or become immortal again? Today, I finally have such a chance. Zhang Cheng's crazed voice echoed in the air. No, you can't do this. If we die, none of the sovereigns will let you go. Satara struggled madly. As his energy was continuously stripped away, he gradually felt weak. It was a kind of weakness that he had never felt before. If this continued, who knew what would happen? Am I really going to die? Or would he degenerate and return to his previous state? No matter what it was definitely not the result that Satara hoped for. Well, let me go. Ha ha. Naive. Do you know what I've experienced the most after taking one step at a time to get to where I am today? The answer is very simple. The strong have the privilege of not being accused of anything. As long as I kill you and successfully assimilate this power into my body, which sovereign will dare to make an enemy of me? Perhaps you are a group of idealists, but there are not many who are willing to sacrifice everything for their ideals. Also, before you die, I can tell you that the true purpose of the Tree of Chaos is not to transform this planet, but to use the characteristics of chaos and disorder to interfere with the laws of the main chord. Simply put, it existed from the moment it was born to kill sovereigns. You're lucky that it hasn't fully matured yet, so I won't kill you today. I'll only turn you into a useless piece of trash. After saying that, Zhang Cheng mercilessly began to strip away all of Satara's energy. In less than a minute, the layer of light that contained the laws of order on Satara's body shattered. His shriveled body and limbs also uncontrollably turned a vibrant green like a leaf. When the things that were extracted were about to exceed the Tree of Chaos capacity, he finally stopped. He withdrew the vines and threw the dying Satara on the ground, as if he was throwing away a piece of trash. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1164. Bastard. You. How dare you? Feeling the emptiness and weakness in his body that he had never felt before, Satara's entire body was trembling. The silver light that enveloped his body had completely disappeared, and in its place was a faint green light that could disappear at any time. There was no need to ask to know that he had lost most of his abilities, and even his connection with the main string had been cut off. But what was unbelievable was that he still retained his eternal and immortal characteristics, as well as his ability to sense the rules. In other words, he had become a piece of trash that only had the knowledge and understanding of the Dominator, but no Dominator powers. In comparison, Zhang Cheng, who had stripped Satara of his powers, presented a completely different kind of intense pressure. It was as if the surrounding space was constantly collapsing as he slowly walked out from the Tree of Chaos. Looking at the despair on Satara's face, he sneered and mocked. Why wouldn't I dare? Do you think I'll be merciful to an enemy who comes knocking on my door? No, being merciful isn't my style. Now, before I change my mind, scram as far away as you can. It's best if you don't let me see you again. You're no longer worthy of being called my opponent. You've made a mistake. A huge mistake. You actually dared to trigger a taboo. The Order Council won't let you off, and neither will the Dominators. Satara's eyes were filled with intense hatred. There was no way he wouldn't hate him. He was currently stuck at a very awkward juncture, unable to take back the powers that originally belonged to him, and unable to give up on his connection with the main string, completely degenerating into a mortal, and then once again becoming a dominator according to his own experience. There was a saying that blocking one's path to wealth was like killing one's parents. Destroying one's potential and future was often much more serious than killing one's parents. Satara had enough reason to hate Zhang Cheng, and even use the rest of his life to plan revenge that would cost his life. Let me off. Idiot, you still haven't figured out the situation, have you? The real war has begun. From the moment you set foot on this planet, the war between order and chaos will engulf the entire universe. No one can retreat, and no one can be spared. Turn around and look behind you. There are many pairs of eyes staring at us. With that, Zhang Cheng raised his hand and snapped his fingers twice. Pa! Accompanied by a crisp sound, a circular crack with a diameter of over 10 meters was torn open, revealing countless pairs of spying eyes. Ah! Ha ha! Look, he found us. A chaos faction, Jimin laughed heartily. He didn't feel awkward at all after being discovered. That's right. I like him, especially that secret weapon. It was a huge surprise for all of us. I didn't know that the power of chaos could be used in this way. And that self-righteous wretch. You didn't even know you were being used. The war is about to begin. Should we leave a mark on this guy as a signal to declare war on the Order? All of a sudden, this group of chaos overlords that had been hiding for a long time finally revealed themselves. They did not hide their desire for war at all. Just as Gru had mentioned before, the balance had been maintained for far too long. Many sovereigns were beginning to feel bored and helpless. But now a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity had finally appeared. All of you have been here all along. Satara's eyes widened as he stared at these old acquaintances who had suddenly appeared. He had always believed that his operation this time was sufficiently secretive and that it was impossible for anyone to know about it. But in reality, from the very beginning, his every move had been monitored by the enemy. That intense sense of defeat and humiliation was no different from losing his power. Apologies, Satara. I regret to inform you that you're out. In fact, you've been used by that guy. You become a chess piece used to test us. I'm guessing that he's hiding in the dark right now, analyzing the threat of that giant tree. So, go back and convey the news of war to the Order Council. Tell them that it's time to decide the direction of the universe's future. Gru walked out of the crack and issued a challenge to his opponent. This was because most schemes and tricks weren't very useful to sovereigns. In the end, what would determine victory and defeat would always be strength. In other words, if a sovereign wanted to defeat another sovereign, he had to win with absolute strength and not rely on some dirty tricks. Take Zhang Cheng, for example. Although he had released many smoke bombs earlier, in the end, he had used the power of the Tree of Chaos to easily crush Satara. The latter couldn't even resist and became a complete cripple. You'll regret this. The Council's power is beyond anyone's imagination. Although Satara was somewhat arrogant, he wasn't stupid. He knew that there was no point in staying, other than to humiliate himself. After saying this, he used what little strength he had left to escape. The most important thing for him now was to bring back the news of the war and find out what was going on. Now that the troublesome fellow is gone, can you give me an explanation now? Especially you, my dear Gru. After sending Satara off, Zhang Cheng immediately turned his gaze to the sovereigns of various appearances. It had to be said that the universe was a magical place. All kinds of intelligent creatures could be born. One of them was even an independent celestial body made of unknown elements. Unfortunately, my friend, I'm afraid I can't explain it to you now. However, as a member of the Chaos faction, I'm honored to be able to fight alongside someone like you. Gru bowed apologetically. Although he had the appearance of a beetle, bowing was a little funny. Fight alongside? With you guys? I'm not sure if I'm going to fight alongside a bunch of people who hide in the dark and refuse to show their faces, Zhang Cheng retorted without batting an eyelid. Before he could confirm their reliability, he would rather have no allies than to have a bunch of allies who might stab him in the back. It was better to go without than to have something substandard. He wasn't like his other self, who would join any organization as long as there were benefits. Once he had the chance, he would take over the organization from the inside and make it his own. Zhang Cheng preferred to create something from nothing. He believed that only then would the things he obtained completely belong to him. You still seem to have a certain level of wariness. Don't worry. The war will soon make you understand that we are the only ones you can rely on. Chapter 1165. The rulers of the Chaos faction did not seem to mind Zhang Cheng's attitude at all. After a simple greeting, they all disappeared without a trace, leaving Gru alone. He wanted to say something several times, but stopped himself. In the end, he sighed helplessly and said, "This is unbelievable. I have to admit that as a life form born in a low-dimensional universe, you've already surpassed the limits of the environment, dimension, and yourself. You've even created an unprecedented weapon, one that can kill or even seal the power of a ruler. I can feel that the tree now has Sitara's abilities, and you're the only one who can control it. Interesting, isn't it? It's too dangerous to devour all of a ruler's power. You'll have to face the rebound of the main string directly. I'm not that stupid, and I'm not that overconfident. In fact, although I seem a little crazy, I'm actually very careful. I never dare to do anything without confidence," Zhang Cheng replied as he created a ball of silver light in his palm. Upon closer inspection, it was not difficult to see that this was the power that Sitara had used before. The order contained in this power was the opposite of chaos, something different from fire and water. But now, as the ruler of the chaotic energy, he could easily control it, and there was not even the slightest bit of instability. "That's right. I admit that you're a little too careful. You're not as impatient as I expected, chasing after your other self's footsteps. On the contrary, you found a safer method of check and balance that isn't too inferior. But I'm curious. You alone probably can't unleash the full power of the Chaos Tree, and it doesn't seem to be complete. There's still an important part that hasn't been completed." As he said this, Gru's eyes flickered with excitement. It was obvious that he was attracted to this new and mysterious method. He wanted to understand the mystery behind it. In fact, the things that every ruler obtained from the main string differed greatly. He was not sure if this knowledge and ability were unique to the other party or could be shared. If it was the latter, that meant that the power of the Chaos faction would increase explosively, crushing the Order and neutral factions. Get rid of all the rulers of the opposing factions. Let the entire universe be reunited under chaos. Just thinking about this crazy plan made Gru tremble all over, as if a glorious victory and dream were within his reach. Zhang Cheng undoubtedly sensed the intense emotional fluctuations of the giant beetle. He chuckled and nodded. "You're right. It is indeed still a work that I have completed. There is still a part of the most important thing that is still being nurtured. I need some time to complete it. How long is a little time? Can we make it in time for the war that is about to break out?" Gru carefully probed. "We should be able to make it. A few years on this planet was no different from a second or two to the sovereigns. Be patient. I promise to give you a surprise in the future." Zhang Cheng casually gave a deadline. He looked so relaxed, as if he didn't care about the upcoming battle at all. "A few years? Are you referring to the number of times this planet revolves around the star?" Gru revealed an interested expression. This was because the word year was usually used by primitive civilizations that had yet to break free from the shackles of gravity. In comparison, most advanced civilizations that entered space would often use units that spanned a wider range, such as light years, star fields, and so on. "What else do you think it is?" Zhang Cheng asked with a half-smile. "All right, it isn't considered long for us. However, please be quick. The Order Council won't give you much time to prepare. I dare bet that once they receive the news, they will immediately send out their main forces in an attempt to destroy the weapon you have so painstakingly crafted. Gru's tone revealed a strong warning. Understood. I'm not an idiot. If the enemy is too strong, I will move this planet along with it. Zhang Cheng shrugged nonchalantly. If he could win, he would fight. If he couldn't win, he would run. He wasn't an idiot who valued dignity and glory more than anything else. Unless he couldn't escape, he would definitely run faster than light. Moreover, moving a planet didn't take much effort. The only thing he had to take note of was that he had to protect the life and ecosystem on the planet when he moved. Otherwise, if he moved to a place without a star or too close to a star, a large number of fragile life forms would instantly die. And these life forms would sooner or later become part of chaos. I'm relieved to hear that. Continue with your game and experiments. I won't disturb you any further. Gru waved his insect-like appendages and mimicked a human. He bowed slightly with one hand on his chest, and his entire body rapidly disappeared without a trace. After watching this so-called ally leave, Zhang Cheng chuckled and muttered to himself, "As expected, they are spying on my secrets. But it doesn't matter. You will never understand my way of thinking anyway. After all, although life forms born in a high-dimensional universe have many advantages, a low-dimensional universe also has its benefits. Creator, the woman you have entrusted to me to watch over is about to wake up. She has broken the dream I weaved." An extremely familiar voice suddenly reverberated in Zhang Cheng's mind. Clearly, it was Islands who had become a fruit of chaos, calling out to him through the mind connection. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng turned and went to the top of the tree. He immediately saw a woman with furrowed brows and moving eyes. No, she should be called a goddess now. She had already shed her mortal nature. Her divinity and divine power were flowing through her veins in her body. So powerful, so beautiful, especially that pure power of darkness. It was simply suffocating. How long until she wakes up? Zhang Cheng asked without raising his head. Islands hurriedly replied, "At most 15 minutes. Master, she has lost many of her memories in the dream maze I weaved, including her own name. So don't be too surprised when she wakes up later." Lost part of her name and memories? A hint of surprise flashed across Zhang Cheng's face, but he soon couldn't help but reveal a playful smile. "Excellent. You did well. Next, let me see if you are the one I desire. Let me see if your soul can bear my expectations." Chapter 1166. The woman woke up faster than expected. In less than 10 minutes, her breathing and heartbeat suddenly sped up, followed by faintly discernible divine power that began to spread in all directions, finally forming a dark domain. "She's about to wake up," Islands reminded softly. "Yes, I know. Not only is she about to wake up, but she's also trying to create her own extraordinary divine power. I have to say, she's indeed a lucky one who's been blessed by darkness. She was born with an unbelievable affinity for this power." Just as Zhang Cheng was speaking, the newborn goddess finally slowly opened her eyes, her entire body gently floating as if she was weightless. Her pair of deep black eyes without the scara was so special, like a bottomless spring that wanted to suck in the thoughts and souls of those around her. After a full minute, she asked in a condescending tone, "Who am I? Who are you? What? You don't remember your own name?" Zhang Cheng did not give a direct answer, but instead asked a question with a smile. "Me?" The goddess frowned subconsciously, as if she was searching her memories, but soon shook her head blankly. "I don't remember. I seem to have forgotten many things, but not all of them. My mind is in a mess. I can't remember anything at all." "Then what about me? Do you still remember who I am?" Zhang Cheng continued to guide the other party's thoughts. Through observation, he could basically tell that she had lost more than a third of her memories, and only with this amount would her thoughts become chaotic to the point that she could clearly remember many things, but for some reason, she just could not connect them. One must know that memories were not something that existed alone. They were closely related to each other. Some were connected by a certain person, and some were connected by time and specific events. Once the key parts of these connections were forgotten, even if most of the memories were still intact, it would be impossible to successfully retrieve them. "You, The goddess's eyes flashed with a strange light, and about 2 to 3 seconds later, a powerful divine power suddenly burst out, at the same time roaring in anger. "It's you! You damn bastard! Not only did you play me like a chess piece, you even abandoned me in the end. I'll make you pay the price of blood." Make me pay? With just you? Perhaps becoming a god gave you an inexplicable confidence, or perhaps your memories made you forget the insurmountable gap between us. All right, I don't care. I'll make you remember that humiliation and fear again. He blurted out the last word. Zhang Cheng controlled the vines on the branches of the tree of chaos and directly tightened the naked goddess, stretching her out in a humiliating fashion. The remaining vines didn't stay idle either. They kept whipping at the surface of the tender skin. In the blink of an eye, the skin was torn open. God's blood dripped down the thigh and was absorbed by the tree bark, forming faint black stripes. "No! How dare you treat me like this? I'm a goddess, the goddess of darkness. He is the only true god in this world." As powerful life forms that surpassed the limits of mortals, gods were born with a strong sense of pride. They were especially unable to tolerate any form of humiliation, or else they would develop an uncontrollable rage. This was also why all mortals who violated the bottom line of the gods would be subjected to a terrifying curse without exception. They might even pass it on to their descendants. Unfortunately, this newly born woman didn't know that the man standing in front of her was actually a ruler of a higher level than gods. In the eyes of rulers, the so-called gods were just ants that could be casually crushed. They weren't much more noble than the mortals they spoke of. The so-called high and low life forms were actually not much different from civilizations. High-level civilizations would discriminate against and enslave low-level civilizations. They wouldn't even recognize the other party as an intelligent race. Instead, they would treat them as livestock like cows, horses, and sheep, animals that could be tamed and raised. By the same logic, in the eyes of high-level life forms, no matter how many low-level life forms died, it was just a vague number. It was like a human accidentally stepping on a large group of ants. They wouldn't even lower their heads to count how many there were, much less care about the feelings of the ants that were lucky enough to survive. There might be a few fellows who had nothing better to do and jumped out to shout boring slogans like defending the right of ants to survive or protecting the ecological environment, but most people would just take it as a commotion and quickly change the topic. Cruel? Cold-blooded? Cold. No, this only depended on a kind of psychology, an emotion called empathy. Of course, since he had long treated human nature as a bone without any meat and fed it to the dogs, Zhangqing no longer had the slightest sense of kinship. Instead, he saw himself as a separate, special, independent entity. He firmly believed that he was special and unique, so he completely ignored the crazy and angry curses of the goddess. Just like that, he allowed the bondage to continue for more than 3 hours. When the other party was tired of cursing, she closed her mouth and endured silently. Only then did he sneer and mock. Looks like your memory has deteriorated slightly. It took you 3 hours to realize the difference between us. Now tell me, will you still fulfill the contract you signed with me? Do I have a second choice? The goddess raised her head slightly, her face full of naked anger and hatred. Not a bad answer. Since that's the case, I'll let you go first. Remember, do your job well. I'll be paying close attention to your every move. After saying that, Zhang Cheng gently waved his hand. Those unbelievably tough vines instantly loosened and violently threw the goddess onto the tree branch. Oof. The newborn goddess obviously did not want to talk nonsense. After using her divine power to heal the injuries on her body, she immediately opened a portal, wanting to enter and escape from this dangerous place as quickly as possible. The moment she stepped in, Zhang Cheng suddenly asked, "By the way, have you thought of your divine name? If not, I can give you a little advice. After all, becoming a god means saying goodbye to your past. It's best that you don't occasionally use the name of a mortal. Otherwise, those with ulterior motives will trace your past and spy on the mystery of you becoming a god. Don't underestimate mortals. As far as I know, more than 1 or 2 gods have fallen in their hands." Thank you for your concern. From today onwards, I am the dark goddess Musa. I will become one with the original darkness of this world. I am the night, the keeper of secrets. After saying that, the goddess who had given herself a new name stepped into the portal and disappeared without a trace. Chapter 1167. The Dark Goddess? It sounds very imposing, doesn't it? But I don't understand why she added so many titles to herself. After all, the only priesthood she controls is darkness. Zhang Cheng shrugged and complained. But he could also understand that she probably had no choice but to do so. It should be noted that such a long list of titles was usually either to raise one's own status or to intimidate one's opponents, creating the illusion that I am stronger than you or I am more professional than you. In any case, even in the information age where knowledge was exploding, ordinary people still could not distinguish between what was real and what was fabricated. The only thing that could be used to distinguish was the reputation of various experts and professors, as well as the university they graduated from and their academic achievements. In other words, people were more concerned about the credibility of the person who provided the knowledge than the content of the real knowledge, especially those things that were too professional for ordinary people to understand. It seemed that apart from listening to the explanations given by experts and professors, it was impossible to figure out the truth in a short time by just relying on the words obtained from books or the internet. Therefore, a large group of fake experts and professors were born. There were even some swindlers who secretly stuffed their own goods and advertised in the name of scientific popularization. This was the case in the information age, and it was even more so in this backward planet where the transmission of information seriously lagged behind. Without a long list of intimidating titles, how could the ignorant people believe in a goddess who had just emerged and was jointly suppressed by the nobles? Therefore, even if it was for the convenience of preaching, Mao Sha had to pretend to be a little more superior. The struggle for faith was not a war in the ordinary sense. She had to deal with the complex and changeable hearts of people. The independent thinking of intelligent beings determined that they were fickle. They might be praising someone loudly 1 second, and the next second, they would push that person to hell through cursing and spitting. Benefits. Give them sufficient benefits, and the relationship between God and believers would be maintained for a long time, forming a stable and powerful church in the secular world. With a church, more resources could be absorbed, and those hostile forces could be eliminated, pulling in the neutral party bit by bit. Of course, this had nothing to do with Zhang Cheng. After confirming that the second half of the plan was not out of his control, he returned to the magic tower and monitored the movements of all the important people through the magic mirror. At the same time, Kerwin, who had escaped death, was hiding in the sturdy castle, constantly reading the information sent back by his spies. After a full half an hour, he finally let out a sigh of relief and cursed with a bitter smile. Damn it! The danger is finally over. The terrifying darkness that shrouded the city is gone. Nothing is left behind except the bodies that died tragically. Are you sure? I don't think that a supernatural event of that scale would leave nothing behind. Baron Kellenst expressed his strong doubts. As one of the witnesses and survivors, he had seen the black energy. With his own eyes, countless human soldiers were swallowed by the darkness. That kind of terrifying power was definitely not something that a human could contend against. I'm very sure. The scout had already entered the central area of the city and returned safely. Whatever happened that night, S is S's. Our enemy is gone. It's as simple as that. Kelvin couldn't wait to conclude the matter. After all, losing so many troops in one go was definitely a huge blow to him. Even his neighbors who didn't have good intentions were starting to get restless, wanted to see if they could get rid of the tyrant. So, even if it was for the sake of the political situation, he had to suppress the matter as soon as possible and create the illusion that he had won. Fine. I hope you're right. But I have a feeling that this matter won't end so easily. Baron Kellen sighed and didn't refute the lord he was loyal to. Kerwin was quite satisfied with his attitude. He casually tossed the densely packed notes on the table into the brazier and asked without turning back, Has my dear wife done anything out of the ordinary these few days? She seems to be really keen on holding balls and salons, dancing and chatting with the nobles who came to join us. But as the mistress, it's understandable for her to do that. The balls and salons have really stabilized the land you've conquered. There aren't any rebellious nobles, nor are there any signs of tax resistance. Baron Kellenst revealed what he knew without hesitation. Balls and salons? Kerwin furrowed his brows and asked, has she been interacting with those people frequently? Well, I'm not too sure about that. According to the informants, most of them are young nobles without much power. Rather than saying they have ulterior motives, it's more like they admire your wife's intelligence and beauty. You know, in the court, there are plenty of young people who are blinded by love. As he said that, Baron Kellenst snuck a glance at his lord and seemed to see a green light above his head. Naturally, as a man who also had a green light above his head, he could understand Kerwin's feelings. In the chaotic noble circles, marrying a young, beautiful, and sociable wife meant being surrounded by a green light. Even the king's queen wasn't exempt from it. Through this kind of close communication, the families would form a close alliance in private, thus secretly influencing politics and even the direction of war. Damn it, how dare she? Kerwin was obviously different from his number one lackey and saw it as a naked humiliation. Apologies, I'm sorry to inform you that she's been in the same room with 3 handsome young men for more than 2 hours. As for what she's been doing there, nobody knows. Baron Kellenst took out a letter and placed it on the table. Calvin picked it up and glanced at it, his eyes blazing with anger. A man and a woman in the same room. What else could it be apart from something indescribable? He wasn't foolish enough to believe that his wife was admiring someone else's talent. There is no such thing as pure friendship between a man and a woman, unless both of them were ugly. Otherwise, one of them would have a strong desire for the other. Feeling the green grass growing above his head, Kerwin couldn't help but tear the letter apart and yell at the knight guarding the door, "Prepare the horses. Move out immediately. I want to return within 5 days." Chapter 1168. Risharn City had once been the capital of a small duchy. After being forcefully annexed by Harrison, it had been rebuilt and expanded several times to become the most prosperous and important city along the river. It had even taken on the role of an administrative and military center. However, as the large country fell into civil strife, the city was unable to withstand Kerwin's brutal army. After a period of symbolic resistance, the frightened nobles took the initiative to send out envoys to negotiate, declaring their surrender to the tyrant on the condition that they kept their titles, personal safety, and property. Thus, even though the city had experienced a short war, it had not suffered too much damage, and the residents had not lost many. In addition to the people who had fled from other places, the commerce and trade of the entire region quickly recovered. Looking down from the tallest arrow tower in the city, one could clearly see the busy merchants hawking their goods in the market, as well as the endless stream of people. There were even more people than before the war, and the transportation of goods was also exceptionally frequent. This was especially so for the Doro Palace, which was known as the Palace of Art. They held banquets almost every night, and the bright magical lights could be seen clearly even from a few hundred meters away. None of the residents living in the city did not know that the host of the banquets was none other than the infamous princess who had personally killed her own father. Most of the people had mixed feelings about this young and beautiful princess. There was intense anger and disdain because she had cut off the last hope of the country's recovery. At the same time, there was a bit of gratitude because she had protected the last piece of land in this chaotic era, allowing those who desired peace to have a place to live peacefully. Being the queen wasn't an easy job in this chaotic and war-ridden world. Moreover, she was only a puppet queen. She did not even have an army loyal to her, and was completely reliant on Kerwin's support. In order to make up for her greatest shortcoming, she had no choice but to desperately rope in the nobles who had sided with her, attempting to use their strength to form a political capital and slowly extend her hand into the army. Violence was what a ruler relied on to hold power, and it was also the foundation of a country's stability. If a ruler could not control the army, then true power would no longer be in their hands. If a country's army was not in its own hands, it could not have an independent will and could not develop according to its own wishes. It was obvious that this new country was actually a puppet. It was a buffer zone that Kerwin deliberately supported in order not to irritate the sensitive nerves of the surrounding neighbors, only to swallow it when the time was right. On the other hand, the young princess hoped that she could break free from their control and truly establish a country of her own. She hoped that one day she could even defeat her brothers and sisters and restore the glorious empire that her father had created. Accompanied by the beautiful music played by the harp, countless beautiful men and women were holding hands and dancing happily in the magnificent palace. They looked so carefree, as if they had forgotten about the ongoing war on the other side of the river. Perhaps, as the saying goes, the only lesson that humans have learned from history is that they have not learned any lessons at all. After enjoying a few days of peace, the nobles and scholars had selectively forgotten about the hardships they had gone through during their escape. Once again, they began to revert to their old ways. In response, the young lady who had just transformed from a beautiful princess into a queen could not help but sigh slightly. She muttered to herself in a voice that only she could hear, "No wonder the country that Father created is about to be destroyed. Such nobles, such ministers, what can I expect them to do?" "Don't be discouraged, Your Majesty. You still have a chance to turn the situation around and get everything back on track." An old man covered in a hood stood behind her and comforted her softly. "Haha, really? Will Vilya return the land that she occupied to me once Kerwin is dead?" The queen raised her head and looked into the old man's eyes, her voice dripping with undisguised sarcasm. Having been exposed to politics and conspiracies, she had long seen through these people who were trying to help her in the name of helping her. But in reality, none of them had good intentions. Either they wanted to use her to get rid of the tyrant and then divide the land that he occupied, or they just wanted to muddy the waters and see what benefits they could take. "I'm sorry. I'm afraid this matter will have to wait until after Kerwin's death, and you will have to talk to Vilya personally." As he spoke, the old man took off his hood, revealing an old and wise pair of eyes. He was none other than Isolde, who had disappeared for a while. Although his appearance had not changed much, in fact, the small bottle of blood that was mixed with divinity had been made into a potion and consumed by him. Now, the enormous vitality contained in the old body was about to be released, but it had not been completely absorbed yet. A delaying tactic. Perhaps after Kerwin's death, Vilya's appetite will be quite frightening, won't it? The girl sneered and mocked herself. She undoubtedly knew very well that she was now just a puppet and had no room for negotiation. She could choose to be the wife of a tyrant for the rest of her life and be toyed with and humiliated by him. Perhaps when she lost her value, she would be quietly disposed of, just like how her father had disposed of those disobedient monarchs of small countries. Or she could kill some tyrants and then negotiate with those monarchs, especially the most powerful queen of Vilya. After paying a certain price, she would regain her relatively independent status and autonomy. Of course, even an idiot would know that the price would be very painful. As the saying goes, when two evils are compared, choose the lesser. No matter how one looked at it, the latter was much better than the former. Isolde smiled and nodded. Her appetite is indeed a bit frightening, but I guarantee that the remaining portion will still be enough to make you a worthy queen. Also, I just received news that Kerwin is rushing back at extremely fast speed. He heard that you have been sharing a room with one or two young and handsome men every night recently. In this world, some men are very possessive and can make people lose their minds. You mean, my dear husband did not bring many troops with him? That's right. He is too arrogant, so arrogant that he thinks that the garrison left in this city is enough to control any situation. How about it? Can you sound out the words of the officer who is under your skirt and launch an assassination and a military coup? I will. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1169. Late at night, a high-ranking military officer who looked to be in his 30s with a mustache was carefully led by a maid through a dark and narrow corridor, sneaking into the queen's bedroom. When he saw the object of his admiration lying on the bed, wearing only thin pajamas, he immediately knelt on one knee and covered his chest, praising in a disgusting way. "Ah, my beautiful queen, your beautiful face makes me drunk. If it's possible, please allow me to kiss your hand and offer my loyalty and life." Of course, my loyal subject. A trace of contempt and disdain flashed in the queen's eyes, but she quickly stretched out her right hand and allowed him to kiss it. As a woman, she knew long ago how to use her status and beauty to achieve some goals. Now, she was just taking it one step further. She began to use the lowest and most primitive desires of men to slowly pull Kerwin's subordinates to her side. After all, reproduction was one of the most basic needs of all life. It was even firmly engraved in the depths of one's genes. Once it was triggered, it was definitely not something that could be controlled by reason. Look at this officer's agitated look. Did he not know how a tyrant would treat a man who cuckolded him? No, he obviously knew very well. But in front of this noble woman who had extraordinary beauty and figure, knowledge and temperament that ordinary women could never have, he could not control himself at all. After kissing her hand, the officer felt the lingering softness and fragrance on his lips. He felt as if his soul had fallen into it. He asked with a bitter smile, "Your Majesty, may I ask if you have any orders for summoning me in the middle of the night?" "Orders? Can't I summon you if there are no orders?" The queen pretended to be playful and blinked her eyes. Loosening the reins only to grasp them better had always been a perfect method for women to deal with men. It was not known if all men had a special hobby. Even though they knew it was a trick to loosen the reins only to grasp them better, they still could not help but run headfirst into it. It was like a male spider jumping into a female spider's web, and in the end, he was eaten clean by the other party. The officer obviously did not realize that he was about to face a choice. He hurriedly shook his head. "How could that be? No matter when you want to see me, as long as you say the word, I will appear in front of you." "Very good. I am very satisfied with your answer. Now come and sit on the bed." The queen lightly patted the white bed. Without asking, he knew that this was a signal and also a temptation to make the prey lower her guard and fall into her trap. Really? Can I?" The officer, who was affected by his hormones, was unable to control himself. He quickly came to the bedside and admired the perfect face and eyes of his dream lover, gazing at the wildly beating heart in his chest. The queen pursed her lips and revealed a playful smile. She reached out her hand and gently caressed his cheek. "Tell me, in your heart, who is more important, me or Kelvin?" she asked softly. "Of course, your orders are even more important than my life." The officer answered without hesitation. "Really? If Kelvin wanted to get rid of me, what would you do?" The queen continued to lead the conversation calmly. "Kill Kerwin. Why? He's your husband. Shouldn't he protect you?" The officer frowned. He wasn't stupid. He was just blinded by the so-called love. "No, you don't understand. He is a very possessive enemy. Take a look at this letter. He's rushing back as fast as he can. I'm afraid he's heard about what happened between the two of us." With that, the queen threw a forged letter to the other party. The latter did not say a word and immediately picked up one of the items. His face instantly turned pale, and his hands could not help but tremble slightly. He could not help but tremble. The reason why the name Tyrant was known throughout the continent was because Kelvin would never let go of any enemy who went against him. Spying on his wife? Or even having an affair with his wife? Just thinking about the tyrant's angry face was enough to send chills down one's spine. He would die. He would really die. And he would die a horrible death. Along with fear, reason quickly overcame desire and took control of his brain. Your Majesty, I beg you, please save me. I still have a family and children." The officer fell to his knees and begged. "Family and children? Why didn't you think of them when you were praising me? I'm sorry, poor thing. I can't save you now. The only one who can save you is yourself." The queen held her chin and enjoyed the officer's ugly behavior. From this moment on, the last bit of affection she had for men disappeared. What replaced it was blatant use and toying with. "Save yourself." The officer raised his head with a dumbfounded expression. "Yes, save yourself. If I'm not mistaken, You have an army of 1,500 men under your command, right? Kerwin came back with less than 100 followers. Think about it. If you block the city gate and kill him in the Barbican, who would dare to come after you? After saying that, the queen bent down and stretched out her finger, gently scratching his chin. Gulp. The officer swallowed subconsciously and finally realized what the woman who had been playing love games with him for a long time was going to do. She was going to use him and his army to kill the tyrant. Then she would seize power. What was even more frightening was that at this point, he no longer had a way out. Even if he exposed the queen's scheme to Kerwin, with Kerwin's vengeful personality, he would not let him go. But on the other hand, if the assassination was successful, not only could he rely on his contributions to become an important minister, but he might even be able to break through the boundary and climb onto the bed of his dreams, becoming the queen's lover in bed. Okay, I'll do it. Under the motivation of having no way out and a bright future, the officer finally made up his mind and prepared to take a risk with everything on the line. However, what he didn't know was that as soon as he left the palace, another officer who was also in charge of 1,500 soldiers was also brought into the bedroom. The same method, the same tactic. In just one night, the queen easily took care of 2/3 of the city's garrison. She was very smart. She did not try to rope in those who were loyal to Kerwin, nor did she touch the commander of the city defense. On the contrary, she chose those high-ranking officers who had many soldiers but had not entered the inner circle. Most of them were young men with strong hormones. Chapter 1170. As the time for Kerwin's return approached, the city of Lissa was in turmoil. Whether it was those who were plotting to get rid of him in one fell swoop, or those loyal subordinates who were ready to welcome his return, none of them realized that a goddess had silently descended and wandered around the palace as if no one else was around. The servants and guards seemed to have collectively gone blind, turning a blind eye to this woman who exuded divine power from head to toe. Even if they brushed past her, they would at most stop for a moment with a puzzled expression before quickly returning to their usual state of mind. There was no doubt that they had all been deceived to some extent, perhaps by their senses or perhaps by their minds. In short, they would subconsciously ignore what they should not have seen. Even a magic alarm in the core area of the palace was not triggered. The busy queen was oblivious to this uninvited guest. To be more precise, she was discussing with her allies how to ensure a fatal blow so that her infamous husband would not have the slightest chance of escaping death. Your Majesty, please look at this map. This is the city gate, and this is the Barbican. As long as he passes through the outer gate, I will immediately order the soldiers to lower the iron gate and firmly trap him in the Barbican. Then, I will order the soldiers to use crossbows and kerosene bombs to bombard him. At that time, not to mention his superhuman recovery ability, even a giant dragon will have to obediently lie down and wait for death. An officer with a mustache pointed at a city defense plan and described his assassination plan with a serious expression. Of course, to put it bluntly, it was nothing much. It was nothing more than using the special fortifications in the city gate area to complete a surprise attack. The advantage of this was that not only did they not need to mobilize too many troops and cause unnecessary vigilance, but they could also ensure an absolute advantage in a narrow area and kill the tyrant with lightning speed, ensuring that no one could change the final outcome. It was important to note that the so-called Barbican was actually a special defensive structure that extended from the city gate to the moat. It was like a small, isolated city. Its main purpose was to protect the city gate from being directly exposed to the range of catapults, siege vehicles, and ballistae. At the same time, it could also provide a comprehensive three-dimensional attack to the enemy forces that were attacking the city gate. Normally, the city gate of a large city would have at least 2 to 3 Barbicans. Even if the enemy broke through the first outer gate, there would be a second and third solid iron gate behind it. This also meant that if the first and second iron gates were lowered at the same time, the enemy would be trapped in a very narrow area, surrounded by long-range units. This plan sounds good, but can you guarantee that your subordinates will carry out your orders 100%? Can you guarantee that those who have not yet joined us will not rush to help? Another officer frowned and questioned. Of course I can guarantee it. There were only two paths leading to the Barbican. One was the Arrow Tower on the east side of the city wall, and the other was the barracks. No matter which path, it will not allow for soldiers to pass through side by side. This also meant that even if there were thousands of soldiers outside, they would not be able to break in easily. Once the tyrant is dead, how many people do you think will still be willing to work for him? The officer with the mustache sneered and retorted. Needless to say, these two fellows didn't like each other and were eager to suppress the other in front of the queen to show that they were more outstanding. In fact, this was the result of the young queen's plan. As an empty shell without any real power, she could not let the power of the army fall into the hands of one or two people. She wanted to spread it out as much as possible. Only in this way could she slowly take back control of the army after getting rid of her husband, instead of continuing to rely on a powerful man. Idiot! Do you think he became a tyrant just because he was cruel and merciless? No. He has a group of madmen who are willing to give up everything for the sake of tyranny. These people will not give up just because Kerwin is dead. They will support a new master and let tyranny continue to exist in this world. So we can't just kill Kerwin. We have to destroy the tyranny he built. Destroy tyranny? Are you trying to make me laugh? We have already tried our best to assassinate Kerwin. Why do we have to overthrow his rule? No, that's not what we should be concerned about now. Once the tyrant dies, the forces under him will fall apart due to the lack of strong restraint. At that time, it will be the best time for Her Majesty to send troops. But what about the people in the city who haven't made a choice? Don't forget, they have 1/3 of the army. They can cause unimaginable slaughter and destruction to this city. Since neither of them was willing to admit defeat, the two of them started a tit-for-tat argument. There was also an officer who also controlled thousands of garrison troops watching the show with a sneer, admiring the three of them. The queen slightly raised the corner of her mouth, revealing an imperceptible smile. She then took the initiative to stop them. Enough. Don't argue about these meaningless things. Killing Kerwin is our only goal at this stage. As for the rest, it won't be too late to think about it after we kill him. After all, as long as he's alive, he's a fatal threat to all of us. You're right. Killing Kerwin is the most important part of the entire plan. Isolt nodded in agreement. If that's the case, then let's discuss the details of the assassination in the Barbican. Remember, we only have one chance. Whether it's alerting Kerwin and causing him to not pass through the outer gate, or the second gate not being closed in time and causing him to rush through the gate and join up with the troops still loyal to him. It means a complete failure. Everyone here should know very well what it means if the assassination fails. That's why we can only succeed and not fail. To be on the safe side, please sign your name on this magic contract. If anyone betrays us, their name will immediately be revealed. Agreed. I'll be the first. Give me the pen. I'll be the second. I'll be the third. Because there was no way out, these plotters scrambled to write their names on a piece of paper that emitted a faint magical energy. Every time he finished writing a name, a red flame would flash across his body, and then he would disappear. It wasn't until the last person had finished writing that all the names appeared on the paper. Then, all the names disappeared as if nothing had happened. Chapter 1171. After a whole night of discussion, everyone finally finalized all the details and all the possible problems. When everyone left to make the final preparations, the young queen stood alone in front of the window, looking at the last darkness before dawn and muttering to herself in a voice that only she could hear, "Patricide! Patricide! I am really a ruthless and evil woman." Evil? No, you are not evil. You are just leaning toward the dark side. A sweet-sounding voice suddenly sounded from behind her. From the dim corner, a mysterious woman whose face and body were wrapped in a thin black veil slowly walked out. Although her face couldn't be seen clearly, but she always gave people a kind of indescribable, beautiful, and noble temperament. Who are you? How did you deceive the heavily guarded guards? The young queen subconsciously raised her vigilance and grabbed a sword that was placed on the table. Its decorative meaning was greater than its practical value. Although she didn't receive strict knight training from childhood like her brothers, but she still had a little bit of confidence in swordsmanship. 2 or 3 ordinary soldiers really might not be her opponent. Put down your weapon. I don't have hostility, otherwise you would have already died. Just as the voice fell, the woman covered in black veil instantly crossed the distance of more than 10 meters and directly arrived behind the queen, then gently stroked the other's slender and delicate neck. If she used a little bit of strength at this time, she could easily break the fragile spine, making the target completely lose the ability to move. One must know that even on Earth with relatively advanced medical technology, hyperplegia was an out-and-out super difficult disease. In this backward planet where medical technology was still in its embryonic stage, it was estimated that the person could only lie in bed or spend the rest of their life in a wheelchair. Feeling the touch of the delicate fingers repeatedly rubbing the skin on her neck, the queen suddenly broke out in cold sweat and asked without turning her head, "Who are you? What do you want to do?" "Who am I? I am a god, a dark goddess. You can call me Mao Sha." The woman covered in black veil whispered in the ear of the queen. "New goddess? What is your relationship with the dark church that was annihilated before?" The queen keenly grasped the key point, because she knew that the reason why Kerwin led the army on this expedition was to annihilate an organization called Dark Church. But for some reason, the army he had brought with him had almost been completely wiped out. Only less than 200 people had luckily managed to escape. What was interesting was that every participant was tight-lipped about the course of the war. Even if they were bribed with money, they wouldn't say a word. The only thing he knew was that the church had completely disappeared from the world. All of its followers and core members had died in that war. "You mean the Dark Church?" "It was originally created by me to awaken an ancient god called Lua. Unfortunately, he disappointed me too much, so I killed him and took his place. Now, kneel down and offer your loyalty and faith. I will grant you endless power and make you my chosen one in this world. In exchange, you must erect my statue, build my temple, and spread my faith." Mao Sha calmly stated her conditions. As someone who had built a church from scratch, she knew all too well how difficult it was to establish a church and spread faith without the help of those in power. The most important thing was the common people wouldn't easily join a church that wasn't officially recognized. So this time, she decided to directly find a weak monarch and support him to regain his power and finally make the Dark Church become the state religion of this country. As the saying goes, it is easy from top to bottom, but difficult from bottom to top. With the support of a monarch, at most in half a year to 1 year, the Dark Church would be able to revive from the ashes and even become the most powerful religion in this world. What do you have to prove that you are a goddess? The queen clearly didn't easily believe the words of a stranger. She carefully retreated and maintained a safe distance, even if she was very interested in endless power. Very simple. Aren't you planning an assassination? I just happen to have a little conflict with that mortal tyrant, so let me launch a divine punishment. At that time, you will understand that no matter how powerful a mortal is in front of a god, they are just like ants. Goodbye, my dear chosen one. Your temperament is really very compatible with the power of darkness. Finished speaking, Mao Sha's whole body was wrapped by a black energy from head to toe and finally disappeared in a thin air, not even leaving behind a footprint. If not for the faint fragrance still remaining in the air, the queen would have thought that everything that had happened just now was an illusion. She was too tired, too nervous, too worried, so she longed for a god to help her. But regretfully, everything was real. Do gods really exist? With strong doubt, she picked up a book called Divine Canon and began to carefully read it. This book was said to be a poem written by a great god in the Age of Enlightenment. It had already been more than 7,500 years, but the words in the book hadn't changed at all. As for the content, most of it was some unclear ravings. Among them, the 3rd chapter clearly mentioned a name, and that was the god of darkness, Lu Hua. Now she urgently wanted to understand everything about this god. Especially, was this god really powerful? Did he reveal a miracle? Could a god really be killed by a mortal? With a series of questions, She quickly immersed herself in the wonderful world described by the prophet, a world where gods and mortals had a close relationship. How interesting. I didn't expect that in the end, the ones who would decide the fate of this world would be three women. I have to say, in a political and social environment where male supremacy reigns supreme, this is really ironic. Sitting in the magic tower, Zhang Qing looked at the images in the mirror and couldn't help but laugh. Two queens, one goddess, all of them were directly or indirectly created by him. Now, they were actually training to deal with the abandoned Kerwin. Even a fool would know that the latter had no chance of surviving this time. Similarly, the three of them joining forces also meant that this continent was about to enter a new era. When a newly born goddess of darkness gathered enough faith, the plan regarding the tree of chaos and the fruit of chaos would enter its final stage, and a weapon that could truly kill a ruler would be completed. When that time came, no matter what kind of enemy appeared, Zhang Cheng was confident that he would never let them return. Chapter 1172. Following the appearance of the new dark goddess in the palace, she once again disappeared without a trace. She did not perform any miracles among the people to recruit and convert believers, nor did she try to contact the other nobles in the city. It was as if she had disappeared into thin air. Although the queen was very interested in this goddess who called herself Mao Sha, in the last few days before Kerwin's return, she did not have much energy to care about other things. Instead, she was fully focused on the plan to assassinate the tyrant. In order to ensure that this plan was foolproof, she deliberately pretended to inform everyone to prepare a grand triumphant ceremony to gather those who had not yet joined her. This ensured that during the assassination process, these people would be separated from the soldiers under their command. Anyone with a little military and political knowledge would understand that the biggest threat to an army was not whether they were well-equipped or not, nor was it their level of training. It was the brain that was responsible for formulating strategies and issuing orders. If the brain could be controlled, then no matter how large the army was, it would be chaotic in a short period of time and would not be able to organize an effective counterattack. Of course, in order to do this, there must be a prerequisite, and that was to have a sufficient excuse. Unfortunately, Kerwin, who always liked to create and highlight his identity and status, was very keen to see his followers and subjects warmly welcome him, regardless of whether they were willing or had no choice but to submit out of fear. This was because it meant that his power was stable. It meant that no one would dare to challenge his supreme authority. When the tyrant's troops arrived near the city gate, the long-prepared orchestra began to play. The guards of honor wore gorgeous silver armor and stood on both sides of the red carpet. In addition, there were at least 5,000 people who were driven out of their homes, suppressing their anger and shouting welcoming slogans. As for the queen, she was dressed in white and stood behind the iron gate in the inner city. She stared at the man who filled her with hatred in the distance. She was very clear that today was the day that her fate would be decided. If she succeeded, then everything would be fine. But if she failed, then her fate would not be any better than the girls in the dungeon who had been ravaged by the tyrant until they lost their minds, or even completely went crazy. Kerwin did not care whether she was of noble blood or not. He only cared about her betrayal. Just as the queen began to think about where she could escape to if the assassination failed, Isolde, who had been shrouded in a large cloak, suddenly reminded her, "Your Majesty, you'd better look happy, or at least lower Kerwin's vigilance." After all, half of the reason why he could survive until now was due to his keen sixth sense. If he notices something and refuses to step into the city gate, then all our preparations will be in vain. "Don't worry, I know what to do." The queen quickly recovered and pulled down her already low neckline to ensure that her stunning cleavage. At the same time, she put on a proud and slightly playful smile. When Tyrant arrived at the gate, she immediately took the initiative to step forward, lifted her skirt, and bowed slightly. "Welcome back, my dear husband. How was the operation?" "Thank you for your concern. It was quite smooth. Although we paid a small price, but the Dark Church has been completely annihilated and can no longer pose any threat." Kerwin replied meaningfully. It was not difficult to see from his eyes that he treated this ordinary greeting as a test, and was not willing to reveal the truth. But it was no wonder. The relationship between the two was not so much husband and wife, but rather enemy. If one side lost its power or value, then the other side would absolutely not hesitate to turn hostile or even stab the other in the back. Then I want to congratulate you. You've won another glorious victory. Come, the ceremony is ready. Let the nobles and subjects of this country cheer for you. After saying that, the queen stretched out her arm, hinting Tyrant to come over and hold her right hand. At the same time, the officers lying in ambush on the wall of the barbican were all tensed up, and their whole body was soaked in sweat. It was one thing to hide in the dark to plan a conspiracy, but to carry it out was another thing. Too many accidents, too many special situations. It would make the originally foolproof plan fail in an instant. So before chopping off the head of the other side, he constantly warned himself not to lower his guard. In fact, not only him, more than 200 trusted soldiers around him were also trembling, and their palms were sweating. In any case, Kerwin's name of Tyrant had already resounded throughout the continent. No matter how those nobles despised his birth, no matter how they preached his rudeness and brutality, they could not erase the fact that he was a powerful ruler. In this way, time passed by minute. Kerwin rode his horse and stood at the door with a strange expression on his face, as if he was thinking about something and did not take a step forward. After a full 2 or 3 minutes, he asked with a smile, "Why did you think of holding a grand, triumphant ceremony for me? Isn't this the duty of a wife?" The queen replied without changing her expression. "Duty? Ha! Is it also the duty of a wife to meet another man behind her husband's back?" Kerwin mercilessly tore open this scar that most men would not be able to talk about. After all, he was not a kind man, and he firmly believed that one who was unaccountably solicitous was hiding evil intentions. Such an obvious act of flattery had undoubtedly aroused the most sensitive nerve in his heart. "Oh, who did you hear that from?" The queen raised her eyebrows, pretending to be surprised. To be honest, she never would have thought that he would announce such a scandal in public that should have been dealt with in private. "Humph. What, are you feeling guilty? Where did those young men you met privately with go? Did they hide in fear?" Kerwin sneered sarcastically. "I think you've misunderstood something. I'm only choosing suitable talents for this country, and it's not as dirty as you think. If you suspect that I'm unfaithful, we can divorce, can't we?" The queen raised her chin, and her eyes flashed with the flames of anger. Of course, this was all an act. She desperately wanted to anger the tyrant and make him lose his mind and rush through the city gate. Not much, just 10 or 20 meters, and the iron gate that was used to block the enemy's attack would be lowered, separating the target from the army outside. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1173. Ha! Picking the right people? I am disappointed in your lousy excuse. Do you know? I was thinking on the way back, what kind of method would you use to face my wrath? But I never thought that you would have the courage to betray me and even attempt to kill me. Kerwin laughed as he looked up at the seemingly empty wall. I don't know what you were talking about. The queen was obviously very calm as she maintained her calm demeanor. But if one looked closely, they would notice that her hands were tightly gripping the sleeves of her inner shirt. She was obviously extremely nervous. You don't know? Didn't you notice that a few birds that were passing by didn't dare to land on the city wall? Usually, this kind of abnormality only proves one thing, that there are many people hiding behind the wall. If I am not wrong, it should be a group of soldiers armed with heavy crossbows and arrows, right? As he said this, the smile on Calvin's face disappeared and was replaced by a coldness as cold as the winter. As a tyrant from a remote town, he would not overlook such unusual details. Many savages living in the depths of the forest would often use the terrain to ambush passing merchants or patrols. After staying in that damn place for a few years, even a fool would know how to observe the reactions of small animals to determine where there was an ambush and where it was safe. Damn it! Attack! Attack! Don't let him escape. Realizing that his assassination plan had been exposed, the mustached officer immediately stood up and pulled the trigger of his heavy crossbow. At the same time, he ordered his soldiers to attack. He knew that if the tyrant did not enter the barbican, then he would have to launch a long-range attack while he was still within shooting range. Otherwise, he would not even have the chance to launch his crossbow. Once he thought of the tyrant coming back to his senses and mobilizing troops from other places to attack this city and torture himself in the most painful and cruel way, the officer trembled in fear. Accompanied by the buzzing sound of the bowstring and the piercing sound of the arrows piercing through the air, more than 40 soldiers with the fastest reaction time stood up and shot deadly swords at the tyrant and his horse. There were many armor-piercing arrows that were as thick as a finger. One had to know that these arrows were specially designed to deal with heavy knights covered in steel or warriors who carried large shields and charged at the city gates. Usually, one arrow could penetrate a wooden shield more than 2 fingers thick and a steel breastplate more than 3 millimeters thick. Under normal circumstances, if a person was hit at such a close distance, unless they had a strong defensive spell or a magical item of equal value, they would definitely die. In more serious cases, they might not even be able to scream. Calvin, on the other hand, was too lazy to even move from his original position, allowing the countless arrows to turn him into a porcupine. His warhorse let out a neigh before collapsing to the ground, twitching as it breathed its last. Shock. Unbelievable. Then there was uncontrollable ecstasy. "We did it! We did it! We did it!" The officer shouted excitedly. Everyone in the crowd couldn't believe that the infamous tyrant had been killed so easily. Just as he was about to rush down to check the corpse and cut off the tyrant's head, Kerwin, who was lying in a pool of blood, suddenly stood up. He pulled out the arrows from his body and sneered. "That's it? You want to kill me like this? Naive. Too naive. No. How is this possible? You didn't die?" The officer stopped in his tracks, his eyes filled with despair. "Idiot. If I was so easy to kill, do you think I would still be alive? Also, I have to tell you that you and your accomplices have been used by that woman. Do you think she really loves you? No, she only sees you as a tool to be used, just like how I promoted you to be an officer. There is no difference." After saying that, Kerwin threw out a heavy arrow covered in his own blood. In the next second, poof! The officer's chest was pierced through. The huge inertia brought him back more than 10 meters until he was nailed into a gap in the city wall. "Damn it! I knew it wouldn't be that easy. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and kill him. I don't believe that he can be revived after being dismembered. Don't hesitate. He is not generous enough to let go of a traitor." Seeing that the situation was going in the worst direction, the queen immediately tore off her disguise and tried to boost the morale. However, it was a pity that the remaining 2 officers seemed to have been immobilized. They stood in place, not daring to move an inch. The death of the guy from before had triggered the deepest fear of the tyrant in their subconscious. "Sigh, useless trash. I have to do it myself in the end." Isolde sighed slightly and took the initiative to take off the hood that was used to cover his face, revealing his true appearance. Although he had been avoiding a direct confrontation with this former ally of his, now that things had come to this, there was no way he could escape. "It's you. So it was you who was behind the scenes and planned all of this. I was wondering why she dared to betray me." After seeing the true face of the enemy, Kerwin's pupils suddenly shrank. He was not a fool. He knew that this old man in front of him had always been serving his master, so this operation might be his master's idea. His heart sank at the thought of becoming enemies with his mysterious master, who possessed endless power. "I planned all of this? No, I was just an executor. You should know who the real mastermind is. Most importantly, as the one who betrayed first, you have no right to blame others. All right, enough with the nonsense. Let's get this over with. You should know that resisting now is the most foolish thing to do. It will only cause you more pain." This time, Isolde did not hide his power. In just a few seconds, powerful magical energy began to gather around his body, forming a dazzling energy vortex. "Kill me? You could try. I won't just sit there and wait for death." Kerwin pulled out his sword with a solemn expression, at the same time taking out 2 bottles of unknown potions, tilting his head back and drinking them. In the blink of an eye, the muscles on his body had expanded by at least 2 times, and even his armor had cracked. There was no need to ask to know that this was a fight to the death. Chapter 1174. How foolish. Do you think you can defeat me with your pathetic strength after losing your master's support? Resistance will only cause you more pain. Isolde sneered as he raised his crystal staff that glowed with a fiery red light. He cast a powerful firestorm of the knights behind the tyrant. Asterisk boom. Asterisk a violent explosion and heat wave followed. Hundreds of pitiful wretches who didn't even know what had happened turned into charred corpses. They didn't even have time to scream. Of course, they were lucky to some extent. At least they weren't like their half-dead companions who were rolling and wailing on the ground in an attempt to extinguish the magical flames. Only a few who were sensitive to danger, such as the tyrant's most loyal lackey, Baron Kelliest, dismounted the moment the firestorm formed and used his mount to block the burning flames. He then took the chance to flee far away and narrowly avoided the disaster. Even so, this spell still shocked and puzzled many of the onlookers. They couldn't understand why the queen would arrange such a clumsy assassination plan with the help of such a powerful spellcaster. Could it be that there was some secret behind it that no one knew? However, these people didn't know that the young queen was also very shocked. After all, Isolde had never shown his true strength in front of outsiders. Most of the time, he was in a role of an advisor, using his rich experience and wisdom to solve problems. As an old-school spellcaster, he had always believed that magic was a last resort and not a reckless display of power like the young ones, forcing everyone to be afraid of him. Doing so would only expose his weakness and wouldn't be able to intimidate others. Magic should be mysterious. Only by maintaining a sense of mystery could one win the fear and respect of ordinary people. If it came to a point where it had to be used, it had to give all witnesses the illusion that magic was invincible. Simply put, it was to use the advantage of information asymmetry to give those who didn't understand magic a psychological hint, forcing them to activate their self-protection mechanism. The first thing they would think of when they saw magic was to run and not rush forward to kill the dangerous spellcaster. Unfortunately, this little trick didn't work on Kerwin. He glanced at the miserable state of his subordinates with an extremely cold gaze and pretended to be indifferent as he mocked. Is this all you've got? Raising your foot to trample a bunch of ants who can't even resist? Even if I don't know what you're trying to say, this isn't enough to scare me. Scare you? No. Please don't misunderstand, my dear old friend. I killed them because they were too much of a hindrance. I don't want to be distracted when I'm dealing with you later. Smelling the burnt smell in the air, Isolde felt as if he had done something insignificant instead of killing hundreds of his own kind. Because anyone who stood at a certain height and held great power in their hands would never put the so-called life above all slogan in their eyes. In fact, in their eyes, the people at the bottom were just a series of cold numbers, a renewable resource, and a consumable. No matter what era it was, this would never change. What now? Why haven't you made your move yet? Kerwin tried to provoke the old man into losing his mind. He knew better than anyone that Isolde was the kind of spellcaster who liked to take risks. If he didn't have enough confidence, he would definitely not initiate an attack. Instead, he would wait for the opponent's reaction and act according to the situation. Although it sounded like a disadvantage, it meant that there was almost no room for mistakes. And a spellcaster who couldn't make mistakes was often the scariest. No, he doesn't need to make a move. You're mine. Just as Isolde was about to respond, a female voice suddenly appeared out of nowhere. The originally clear sky was suddenly filled with dark clouds, as if it had suddenly turned from day to night. The next second, a goddess wearing a black veil descended from the sky, bringing with her endless majesty into the sight of everyone present. Who are you? Kerwin narrowed his eyes and carefully probed. Due to the difference in appearance and temperament compared to when she was a mortal, he didn't immediately recognize this dangerous enemy who had a deep grudge against him. What? You've just destroyed the church I founded. Have you forgotten so quickly? The dark goddess walked through the crowd with graceful steps. Wherever she passed, many people couldn't help but fall to their knees with a plop, their bodies twitching slightly. "It's you. How are you still alive?" Kerwin opened his mouth in shock. "Yes, that's the expression. Very good." I felt an unparalleled sense of satisfaction. "Blasphemer, you will pay for your actions today, a price more terrible than death." As Mao Sha spoke, she used her extraordinary divine power to tear and drag the tyrant's soul. In just a few seconds, Kerwin felt a heart-wrenching pain. At the same time, his body seemed to have lost control. No matter how hard he struggled, he couldn't move. "Damn it! What did you do to me?" He roared with a ferocious expression. "Idiot! Take a good look at her eyes. She's no longer a mortal, but a true dark goddess." Isolt finally couldn't help but remind him. "What? Goddess?" Kerwin subconsciously raised his head, only to see a pair of eyes that couldn't be described with words. Darkness. Endless darkness. There wasn't the slightest bit of light, but it was in such a pair of eyes that he saw his own ugly struggle and despair. Mao Sha undoubtedly caught the instant collapse of his psychological defenses. She opened her mouth slightly and uttered a word that made everyone's heart beat violently. "Divine punishment." Asterisk bang. Asterisk Kerwin's magically strengthened body was torn apart on the spot by an invisible force. He couldn't even hold on for a second. At the same time, his soul was constantly changing shape under the terrifying pressure. Only the expression of extreme pain on his face was completely preserved. No mercy, no forgiveness. There was only a torment that didn't stop for even a moment. As the name implied, divine punishment was a special technique used by the gods to punish mortals who offended them. It was an extremely cruel punishment. Chapter 1175. So this is divine punishment. The young queen's eyes widened as she stared at Kerwin's face that was becoming more and more distorted and ferocious. She could even clearly hear his silent screams and pleas. She could not believe that the tyrant who she had no choice but to compromise and compromise was now as weak as a newborn baby, unable to resist at all. God, this familiar yet strange word kept echoing in her mind. No mortal could remain calm after witnessing the power of a god, and no one could resist the temptation of obtaining benefits from a god. This was especially so for a queen who didn't have any real power in her hands and was surrounded by countless spies with malicious intentions. If she could obtain the blessings of a true god, it would be equivalent to obtaining a bargaining chip to compete with the other party on the negotiation table. Before ensuring that they had the ability to resist a god, no monarch would joke with their family's lives for such a small benefit. After all, there were many ancient stories and legends that mention the curse of a god. Once infected, it would be passed down from generation to generation and would only disappear when all the descendants died. In comparison, Isolt was much more well-behaved. He stood in place obediently and did not move at all, his whole person like a statue. Of course, this was not because he did not want to move, but because the bottle of blood that contained divinity was constantly boiling in his body, severely interfering with his perception and control of magical energy. There was no need to ask to know that this was the inevitable outcome of taking a shortcut. Although absorbing a little divinity of darkness could allow a mortal to regain their youth and delay their aging and death, it also meant that they would be affected and controlled by the original owner of the divinity. However, in Isolt's eyes, this price in exchange for a long life was completely worth it. Furthermore, he believed that as long as he was not abandoned by his master, this goddess before him would definitely not dare to use this to do anything. Therefore, he was safe. At least for now, he was safe. Undoubtedly, Mao Sha also felt that incomparably familiar divinity. She glanced at Isolt from the corner of her eyes, pursed her lips, and asked, "You're that thief? The one who stole a little blood from me?" "No, great goddess, I'm not a thief. That small bottle of blood was given to me by my master." Isolt bowed deeply. In front of gods who were many times more powerful than him, he never minded showing his most humble side. "Master? Ah, you mean that guy." Mao Sha pursed her lips and smiled playfully. Then, she said in a low voice, "Then, are you interested in becoming my chosen? Look, you already have the divinity of darkness. I only need to inject a little more divine power, and you will immediately obtain unimaginable power. I'm sorry, but I already have someone I'm loyal to. I'm afraid I'll have to decline your kindness." Isolt looked at Kerwin, who was suffering from torture. His meaning was self-evident. There were many people in the world who thought they were smart. They liked to use the identity of the weak to wander between the strong to prove their intelligence. However, many people did not know that there were only a few cases of success. Most of the time, they either did not have a good sense of propriety and were crushed like bugs by the joint forces of the strong, or became cannon fodder the moment they betrayed their master. Moreover, with Kerwin as an example, how could he, who was relatively conservative, dare to betray a master whom he did not even know the depth of his strength? The only thing he knew was that the master he was loyal to had unimaginable power and could even inadvertently create a real goddess of darkness. Hee, you're a smart guy. You know how to survive better than anyone I've met who thinks they're smart. After saying these meaningful words, Mao Sha stepped in front of the young queen. She stretched out her right hand and gently stroked the other party's smooth and delicate cheeks. Using an extremely serious voice, she said, "How about it? Have you thought about my previous suggestion?" I've thought it through. I agree." After a moment of hesitation, the queen hurriedly nodded. She did not even pay attention to her subordinates who were kneeling on the ground. After all, to her, although the tyrant was dead and his soul was constantly enduring pain and torture, this did not mean that there were no other enemies. Thus, borrowing the power of the gods and religions to balance the power of the secular kings was undoubtedly a good choice. As for whether the religions would expand in the future, and whether they would try to influence and control the political power, that was a matter for the future. If she refused now, whether this new kingdom could survive or not would be a big question mark. "Very good. Now kneel." The goddess of darkness nodded in satisfaction. She pressed her palm down lightly, indicating for the queen to kneel in front of her. The latter did not hesitate and directly lifted her skirt and knelt on the ground. After she knelt, Mao Sha raised her left hand and recited in an aria-like tone, "I, the goddess of darkness Mao Sha, hereby announce that this mortal is my spokesperson in the mortal world. She is the supreme, chosen one who receives the care and blessings of the darkness. No matter who it is, if anyone dares to do anything disrespectful to her, they will suffer my wrath. Now, I bestow upon you glory and strength. Work hard to spread the faith of darkness, and let more ignorant mortals understand that I am the only true God in this world. The other shrines worship false gods." As soon as she finished speaking, an impenetrable darkness enveloped the queen from head to toe. After a short few seconds, when the darkness dissipated, people could clearly see two extremely exquisite black magic patterns on her forehead and cheeks. Her body also began to emit a dark energy that merged with the surrounding scenery. "Thank you for your generous bestowment and protection. I swear that as long as my descendants and I rule this country, we will spare no effort to spread your faith and let every citizen become your believer." Feeling the great power that was on the verge of erupting, the young queen raised her head and swore in a slightly excited tone. She understood that from this moment onwards, she was truly in control of her own destiny and not a puppet on strings. "I look forward to your performance this time." The goddess of darkness, who had seen and experienced too many betrayals, smiled. Her entire body suddenly disappeared without a trace with the dark clouds in the sky. At least 5 minutes after she left, the people who were affected by the divine power trembled as they got up from the ground. Their expressions when they looked at the queen were no longer filled with all sorts of ambitions and desires. Instead, there was a trace of fear. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1176. So, the woman who founded the Dark Church didn't die, but instead killed the god she served. And now she has become a true goddess? Sitting on a chair in the main hall of the capital, Villia frowned as she listened to the news brought back by Isolt. Her face was full of confusion and worry. According to the original plan, after Kerwin was eliminated, she was going to support the prince who had made a deal with her and take 1/3 of the territory of the fallen empire. But now, because of the sudden addition of a god, everything had become confusing. That's right. Please don't doubt my judgment, because that's what Master said himself. Isolt reminded her with a serious expression. Master? Is this also part of Master's plan? Villia's expression changed slightly. Perhaps a god who had suddenly appeared was not enough to make her feel afraid, but if it was related to her mysterious and dangerous master, then it was a different story. Especially after learning about Kerwin's tragic end, she had extinguished her last trace of hope and dared not do anything that would outwardly agree but inwardly oppose her master. Isolt smiled bitterly and shook his head. I'm sorry. Although I want to give you a definite answer, I really don't know anything. Master would never tell us his real plan because we're too weak. Because we are too weak, so weak that we can't participate in such a grand plan. Think about it. He can even turn a mortal into a god with his own hands. If he can do such an incredible thing, what else can't he do? In that case, how do you think we should treat this new country and the dark goddess who protects it? Villia asked as she gently tapped on the armrest of her chair. It was obvious that she was a little anxious now, just like those who were used to giving orders from above when they found that the situation was starting to get out of their control. After all, religion had always played the role of spiritual opium on this continent, assisting the nobles in conquering the lower classes and making people believe that status and wealth could be passed down through the bloodline. The descendants of nobles would always be nobles, and the descendants of serfs would always be serfs. Only a few lucky ones who were favored by fate were qualified to break the barriers of class. As for the majestic statues enshrined in the main hall, they were merely sculptures. No matter what the clergy did, they would not punish them. But now, there was suddenly a religion that had a real god behind it, that had the ability to easily kill the powerful tyrant. Such a strong contrast was a challenge for any monarch. Because from now on, they had to make a choice. Would they voluntarily give up part of their rights to embrace this religion that was destined to become stronger and stronger, or would they become its enemy and restrict its spread within their own territory? Most importantly, if they still followed the original plan to divide up the huge empire that had fallen into civil strife, would the goddess take revenge? In any case, she was the first goddess in the world to appear in her true form and show her divine power in front of everyone. No one could understand how a goddess' way of thinking was different from a mortal's. Isolt obviously pondered for a long time, then took a deep breath and replied, I think you only have two paths now. One is to imitate the other side and build a magnificent shrine, declaring that the Dark Church will be the only legal religion in the kingdom. Only in this way will your next plan not be obstructed. In the eyes of the gods, they don't care about all the rights and interests in the secular world. They only care about one thing, and that is the number of believers and the influence they have on the world. The other is to give up the expansion plan and join forces with the Queen, who is as bold as you, to divide up this continent. Oh, you seem to admire the woman who killed her father with her own hands? Villia raised her eyebrows in surprise. This was the first time she had heard the old man in front of her praise someone. In addition, the other party was also a woman who ascended to the throne in a complicated political situation, so it was inevitable that she would be very curious. Yes, just a little bit. You have to understand that daring to kill your own father is also a kind of courage, especially when you clearly know the consequences of doing so, but still dare to stand up and bear the heavy sin. In addition, she is also particularly good at using her beauty and political skills to win over subordinates from the enemy camp. These alone are enough to prove that she's not a qualified ruler. In this respect, you are not as good as her. Isolt was obviously not like the ignorant people who only saw the stain of killing her own father. Instead, he perceived the other party's true motive, which was to help her father end his pain. Is that so? I'm getting more and more interested in her. What do you think about inviting her to come to the border and meet me? Villia's tone was full of interest. Perhaps it was out of appreciation for each other, or perhaps he simply wanted to catch a glimpse of his future opponent. In short, she believed that it was necessary to have a face-to-face talk, whether it was for the current complicated situation or the possible all-out war that might break out in the future. I agree. You should indeed meet her. If nothing unexpected happens, both of you will benefit from this meeting. To be honest, I sometimes wonder if Master is doing this on purpose. He actually allowed 3 women to stand at the top of this era and decide the future of the world. Isolde seemed to have realized something, and his eyes flashed with a strange light. Villia was obviously stunned when she heard this, but she quickly shrugged with a smile. This world has continued under the rule of men for many years, and it's time for women to make the decisions. In this respect, I admire Master's courage. At least he gave us a chance to prove ourselves, didn't he? I hope so. Isolde sighed non-committally. He didn't know why, but when he thought of the tree of chaos that towered into the clouds, he felt a chill run down his spine, as if something terrible was about to happen. All right, don't be so sentimental. Let the Royal Knights prepare. It will be activated in 3 days. Also, send a messenger to send a message to the Queen, saying that I will be waiting for her at the border town. With that, Villia stood up and walked toward the study on the 2nd floor. She couldn't wait to personally write a letter, imitating the meeting between the famous kings of the past, leaving a rich mark in history. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 1177. Master, according to your instructions, I've arranged a meeting for them. As soon as he left the capital of the kingdom, Isolde teleported back to the magic tower and recounted everything he had done. Although he had long known that his master had probably used those powerful magic mirrors to see the entire process clearly, he still couldn't help but be shocked. The meeting of 2 women will decide the direction of history. That sounds interesting, right? Zhang Cheng asked absent-mindedly while holding his chin. It is very interesting. I'm already looking forward to seeing the fear, despair, and hysteria of those male monarchs. Isolde obviously didn't understand the deeper meaning behind his master's words, and could only reluctantly agree with him. However, Zhang Cheng didn't care about this, and continued to ask, "Do you understand time? Time?" Isolde's expression became even more strange, and he didn't understand what his master was trying to say. "That's right. Time." Zhang Cheng nodded slightly. Actually, the so-called time is a huge net. Regardless of whether it happened in the past or in the future, in reality, everything already exists. Everything you're experiencing now is just moving according to a certain pattern on this boundless net. The previous you and the next you should be 2 completely different people from the perspective of time and space. Master, I don't understand what you're saying. Even though Isolde desperately wanted to understand the explanation of time in these few short sentences, he had no choice but to give up in the end. It wasn't that he wasn't smart enough, but that he wasn't at that level yet. It's fine if you don't understand, just listen. Zhang Cheng didn't seem to care about this at all, and a faint smile still hung on his face. When a person transcends the limits of time and can look down on time from a higher dimension, they'll realize that the causality that many people think of doesn't actually exist, and there's no such thing as fate. This is because all possibilities extend to a parallel universe and space. Think about it. When you can see everything that happened in the past and the future, and even countless possibilities, what will you do? I don't know. Isolde shook his head blankly. You don't know? Ha ha ha. Zhang Cheng suddenly burst into laughter. While laughing, he exclaimed, "Yes." He didn't know. It was indeed a very good answer. Believe me, omniscience and omnipotence is a curse, a frustration, and a helplessness. It is easy for you to lose your precious curiosity and desire to explore. That's why I hate prying into the past and future, and I also don't like staying in high-dimensional spaces. You can see the past and the future. Isolde finally caught the keyword. That's right, I can, Zhang Qing openly admitted. After getting a positive answer, the old man suddenly became very excited. He pointed at his own nose and asked, "Then can you tell me what my future is like? Did I get what I wanted? What do you think the future is? An eternally unchanging straight line? No, my dear servant, the future is not set in stone. Do you remember what I mentioned earlier? Time is a net. Every decision you make, every choice you make will change the future in the next second. Unless you can jump out of the three-dimensional space like me, you will forever be trapped in the network of time, in an infinite loop with no beginning and no end. Zhang Cheng explained casually. Then how can I jump out of this infinite loop like you? Isolde's tone revealed a strong sense of curiosity. It was impossible not to be curious. After all, this was time that had been studied by countless powerful spellcasters. It was a terrifying power that was regarded as supreme, and even gods could not resist. First of all, you have to let yourself transcend time, at least to become a god. Then you will gradually understand the true nature of time. As for the next part, come to me when you become a god. After saying that, Zhang Cheng gently waved his hand, indicating that Isolde could leave. Isolde was obviously a little reluctant, but he was afraid of angering his temperamental master, so he could only reluctantly turn around and leave the room slowly. Not long after he left, Gru appeared on the balcony and asked in an uncertain tone, "Why talk about time to a life that lives in the three-dimensional universe? Don't you understand that doing this will only bring him intense confusion? It won't have any effect at all." How do you know it won't have any effect? At least in a network of time, every life in the three-dimensional universe has a chance to break free. Zhang Cheng turned his head and retorted. And then, what do they do even if they break free? In the end, they would still be trapped in the next dimension. Time is only an insignificant part of the high-dimensional universe, just like how dominators like you and me can easily travel through time, space, and distance to go anywhere we want. But similarly, after becoming a dominator, everything after that point in time will disappear into thin air. Because of this, you and the other you have always surprised and intrigued us. As Gru spoke, he walked in from the balcony. After not seeing him for a while, his body seemed to have expanded a little, and the shell on his body also flickered with an unusual light. Maybe it's a coincidence, maybe it's deliberate, who knows? You should ask him about this, not me. Zhang Cheng pretended to be innocent and spread out his hands. All right, I'll find a time to ask him face to face. Now, let's return to the previous topic. Why did you tell him about the mysteries of time? Gru clearly did not intend to delve into this topic and decisively raised the question he was interested in. He did not think that the other party was just killing time out of boredom, but was hiding some unspeakable secret. Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't want to answer your question for now. Since you're a dominator, why don't you look for his future possibilities on the network of time? But his fate has already been interfered with by you. Any point in time where a dominator interferes will not appear on the network of time. And when you leave the three-dimensional world, everything will return to its original point, and the parts that have been tampered with will automatically be hidden. Apart from you, no one else will know. Gru waved his insect-like appendages and complained. If it was possible to peek into the future where a dominator interfered with through the network of time, then someone would have already gone to a certain node in the future and figured out the true use of the Tree of Chaos. Chapter 1178. Isn't the unknown and unpredictability the most interesting thing about this universe? If everything stays the same, just like the life forms living in the three-dimensional world, forever bound by time, what's the point of living and being able to prove one's existence? I know that many of you rulers are used to prying into time to find answers. I don't know if you've noticed, but as you rely on this ability, most rulers are losing their curiosity and creativity. They're becoming more and more mediocre, clinging to those boring and tiresome rules. I believe that with your intelligence, you should understand that the true rulers of the universe aren't like this. Rather than calling them rulers, they're slaves to rules and power. When he said this, Zhang Cheng's tone revealed undisguised disdain. He had to admit that the rulers who had lived for who knew how long did indeed possess unimaginable power. They were even much more powerful than he was. However, the problem was that these powers hadn't grown over such a long period of time, nor had there been any large-scale changes. This also meant that after they officially became rulers, they couldn't avoid falling into a state of stagnation. Even their subconscious minds had accepted the cruel reality and were no longer willing to take huge risks to explore the path to a higher level. Looking at the pride and madness in Zhang Cheng's eyes, Jelu couldn't help but smile bitterly and sigh. Sigh, has it finally come to this? From the first day we met, I had a premonition that you'd eventually walk down this path filled with danger, but I didn't expect it to be so soon. I still can't understand why you, who came from the three-dimensional universe, are always so impatient and unwilling to stop and rest for even a short while. Stop? Why should I stop? Zhang Cheng sneered and shook his head. Haven't you heard of this saying? Because life is short, there's an urgent desire to learn, to understand the endless mysteries of the universe, and even to surpass one's own limits to progress towards eternity. You've been in my hometown, so you should know that the people living there often only have less than 100 years of life, excluding a third to a quarter of the time spent sleeping and resting, and the nearly 12 years of infancy. The amount of time they have left is pitifully small. Yes, you are already completely different from them. Gru suddenly interrupted. Perhaps it was because he had been the ruler for too long, but he clearly did not see Zhang Cheng and the ordinary humans on Earth as the same kind of life form. He did not feel that there was any necessary connection between the two at all. Zhang Cheng had already noticed this and explained casually, "No, you're wrong. Perhaps from a biological point of view, I had already surpassed them by countless levels, but my thoughts and habits remained. This is the biggest difference between you and me. I've always thought of myself as a human, but you've completely abandoned your past. You don't even acknowledge your original race. You still think of yourself as a human." Gru's tone revealed his undisguised surprise. He truly could not imagine how a ruler who wielded such great power could still retain primitive concepts of race and identity. Why not? Zhang Cheng shrugged his shoulders and asked. Abandoning the past doesn't mean abandoning everything, especially the parts that benefit you. Although humans have many flaws, such as short-sightedness, selfishness, greed, and are always tempted by endless desires, they also have some advantages that other races cannot compare to. That's why I don't feel that admitting that I'm a human is anything worth making a fuss about. I see. I think I understand your way of thinking a little. You've retained the impatience of humans to catch up and surpass others due to the short lifespan. You're willing to take huge risks for this. I'm not sure if this is an advantage or a disadvantage, but it has indeed made you who you are now, Gru concluded thoughtfully. That's right. To me, death isn't scary. What's scary is being trapped in one place forever, unable to take another step forward. If I were to live like you guys, I'd rather embrace death. At least after death, I have the chance to embrace and understand one of the most basic laws of the universe. Oh, right, I almost forgot to ask. You didn't suddenly visit me just to discuss this with me, did you? Zhang Cheng suddenly changed the topic and began to probe the other party's intentions. He did not think that this large beetle would come to chat with him for no reason at this special time. No, of course not. Gru shook his head and took out a metal plate engraved with unknown words. Take a look. This is the ultimatum that the Order Parliament has given us. I believe that it won't be long before the war that you're anticipating will erupt. War. Zhang Cheng took it and glanced at the words on the metal plate. An extremely strange expression appeared on his face. This was because the contents were not so much a declaration of war as it was a division agreement. Just like the eve of the Second World War, when Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union worked together to divide Poland. The Order Parliament hoped that before the two sides went to war, they would first get rid of all those fellows from the neutral faction. You don't seem to be surprised by this result? Gru's tone carried a hint of playfulness. There's nothing to be surprised about. This was to be expected. If two equally powerful factions intend to get rid of each other, then they will definitely first get rid of the third faction that's eyeing them covetously. Moreover, being neutral means that neither side is pleasing, so it's completely reasonable for them to become the target of attack. But what I'm interested in is, will the rulers of the neutral faction really wait for death? While saying this, Zhang Cheng kept staring into Gru's eyes, trying to find some useful information. Regarding this point, you'll have to personally ask them to find out. I've already given you the ultimatum. Now it's time for you to make your choice. Remember, before the war officially erupts, you must report to our headquarters. Otherwise, we won't treat you as an ally. As soon as the last word was uttered, Groot disappeared without a trace once again. The corners of Zhang Cheng's lips curled up as he sensed the vague power of order emanating from the slate. Using a voice that only he could hear, he muttered to himself, "Can a war without any deaths and sacrifices be considered a war? No, this isn't the war I want. I want to see rivers of blood and see the pain and despair on your arrogant faces." Chapter 1179. While Zhang Cheng was secretly plotting to make the Juggernauts bleed or even die, on the other side of the universe, the Initiator and his good friend were hiding on a barren planet, conducting extremely cruel experiments. How is it? Did your research succeed? The Initiator stared at the shriveled body on the table that was still struggling and twitching as he carefully asked. No, almost there. Give me that tool. The other person continued to maintain his focus, constantly cutting open the dotted lines that connected the shriveled body to it. If one looked closely, they would discover that the owner of this shriveled body was none other than Satara, who had been defeated by Zhang Cheng not too long ago. Perhaps no one would have imagined that he, who had just returned to the Order Council, would be captured to this unknown place and suffer endless torment and humiliation, especially those dotted lines, which were inseparable links between the Juggernauts and the main string. Whether it was their bodies or souls, they had long since merged into one, and there was no possibility of them being separated. Of course, that was under the condition that the Juggernauts were not weakened. However, Satara's situation was slightly special. Most of his power had been stripped and absorbed by the Tree of Chaos, leaving only some basic control over the laws. Thus, someone took advantage of this weakness and began to attempt to understand the mysteries between the Juggernauts and the main string. Damn it, you better hurry up. This kind of thing can't be hidden for long. The Initiator urged anxiously. How would he not be nervous? It must be known that once the Order Council found out about his secret research, he would definitely become the target of public criticism, and he would probably have to spend most of his time on the run. Calm down. There's still time. You should understand that we're doing an incomparably great feat once we succeed. It'll be enough to change the entire universe. The bespectacled man's face was filled with indescribable madness and obsession. He, who had conducted countless taboo research, had never imagined that there would be a research that could melt his cold heart and release a passion that was even hotter than a star. Right now, he no longer cared about his own life or death, nor did he care if he would become the target of the Juggernauts. He only wanted to understand the truth behind each dotted line. 10 minutes. I'll give you 10 minutes at most. The Order Council seems to have noticed something and is using some kind of power to scan a large area. The distorted space I created can only fool them for a short while. After 10 minutes, they can appear at any time. After saying that, the Initiator didn't care whether his old friend understood or not. He directly prepared for the worst. Realizing one's ambition was never an easy task. Not only did he need to take a huge risk, he also needed to have sufficient strength. Unfortunately, he didn't have enough strength right now. He wasn't even sure how long he could last against the Sovereigns. Time ticked by slowly. 10 minutes wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. When the last second of the countdown ended, several resplendent beams of light descended from the sky, breaking the distorted energy that enveloped the surface of the planet. Needless to say, the rulers of the Order Parliament must have discovered this place. The leader glanced at Satara, who was lying on the platform, and immediately roared, "Bastard! How dare you openly violate the taboo? I'm sorry, but I think you should listen to my explanation." The Initiator hurriedly stood up and tried to use words to buy time. Unfortunately, no smart person would waste their time listening to a traitor's explanation at this moment. Not even half a second had passed. Attacks that blotted out the sky and covered the earth enveloped him. There was no gap. There was no rest. There was only the ravages of devastation. The Initiator didn't even have a chance to counterattack. He could only bitterly endure and ensure that this small area wasn't affected so that the experiment could continue. This power was so terrifying that the entire planet didn't even last a second before it exploded into countless particles and dust. Only the surface of the planet remained floating in the dark universe. Despair. Even the sovereigns could only despair and wait for failure in the face of such terrifying power. However, at this critical moment, the man lying on the platform suddenly raised his hands and shouted excitedly, "Success! I did it! I now know where the sovereign's power comes from. I also know their weaknesses and how to completely kill a sovereign." As soon as he finished speaking, he inserted the strange cylindrical device in his hand into one of the broken lines and then pressed the button on top of it. Instantly, Satara, who was still struggling in pain, turned into a beam of light that pierced through the multidimensional universe and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, all the matter and energy surrounding the beam of light began to collapse and gather toward the center. A large area of nothingness rapidly formed around the beam of light. No, no, no. What did you do? You actually killed a sovereign. Kill him quickly. Don't let him reveal that secret. Retreat. Retreat quickly. Otherwise, we'll all be sucked in. Accompanied by the angry and panicked voices of the Order Parliament's sovereigns, this part of the universe sank into boundless darkness. This wasn't the kind of darkness that was filled with dark matter in the ordinary sense. This was true darkness without anything. In the center of the darkness, the initiator looked at his old friend who seemed to have gone crazy. He finally couldn't help but ask, "What did you do? You actually trapped the two of us in this place. Do you know? I can't feel any power at all, and I can't escape from this nothingness." Trapped to death? No, you're wrong. We just obtained the key to the Supreme Palace. Look at this beam of light. What do you think it is? The man's lips curled up slightly, and a chilling smile hung on his face. I don't know. The initiator shook his head without hesitation. At this moment, he wasn't in the mood to play guessing games. He only wanted to understand the situation as soon as possible and then decide what to do next. Since it's the main string, it's the sovereign's main body. It's also an indispensable part of supporting this universe. However, it's different from normal mainstrings. The other end is connected to nothingness, a place completely opposite to the physical universe. It's an idealistic universe, the man explained as he licked his cracked lips. An idealistic universe? The initiator subconsciously frowned. Yes, think about it. When you only need a thought, an unwavering belief, you can make matter and energy appear out of thin air, creating objects or life forms that don't conform to common sense. How interesting would that be? That's why I call this beam of light the reverse mainstring. It connects to another universe, and to the sovereigns who control the materialistic universe. It's the most lethal weapon. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 1180. Since this is the most lethal weapon for the sovereigns, why am I still alive? Why haven't I been swallowed up by this endless void? The initiator frowned as he asked this question, reaching out to touch the pillar of light. He discovered that the moment his fingertip touched the pillar of light, his finger disappeared into thin air. It wasn't broken down into some sort of particle state, nor was it sent into another space. Instead, it was completely erased. From the point of view of the existence of matter, it had been denied. Such a strange situation clearly went against common sense, and it also didn't conform to the laws of the universe. Haha, that's a good question. I believe you've already noticed that on the other side of the pillar of light, the existence of matter has been denied. Thus, when you approach it, your body made of matter and energy will disappear. Even the laws controlled by the sovereigns will be distorted, causing them to be unable to function. That's because it's a completely idealistic world, where all power originates. As he spoke, the bespectacled man pointed at his own head. Willpower. A strong and unwavering willpower is the key. Those sovereigns who are used to controlling matter and energy have long since lost their pursuit of the spiritual world. Thus, although they appear to be incomparably powerful on the surface, their hearts are abnormally weak. They're so weak that they can't strongly affirm themselves without being able to sense the outside world. This also means that the moment they approach the pillar of light, they'll be denied and erased by the power of the other universe. However, We're different. We all firmly believe that we're walking on the right path, that we'll definitely succeed. It's precisely because of this that the Pillar of Light is far less destructive to us than the Sovereigns. I see. I understand. The initiator nodded thoughtfully. Simply put, as long as you firmly believe in your own existence, you won't be erased by the power of the other universe, right? You think that's easy? No. Believe me, firmly believing in your own existence isn't easy, especially when we pass through the Pillar of Light and arrive at the other universe. The more knowledge you have, the less confidence you'll have in your own existence. Furthermore, I have a premonition that the other universe has some sort of connection with the one we're in now. Perhaps it's a reflection, or perhaps it's part of an infinite loop. In any case, there are countless secrets waiting for us to discover. While saying this, the man with glasses opened his arms, his eyes flashing with a crazy light. Without a doubt, he had already made up his mind. No matter how dangerous it was, he had to go to the other end of the light pillar to take a look. Looking at his old friend's abnormal mental state, the initiator could not help but remind him, "Are you crazy? Our original plan didn't include this. Think about it. If we really can't come back, or if we disappear on the other side forever, what should we do next?" The bespectacled man grinned and replied, "Plan? No, no, no. That's your plan, not mine. Do you still remember our agreement? I will help you complete your revenge and fulfill your unreachable ambition. But what I pursue has always been to explore the unknown and unearth the ultimate secrets of the entire universe. Now, this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity is right in front of me. Do you think I will give it up? So, it's finally time for us to part ways?" A helpless expression appeared on the initiator's face. He was not an idiot. He could clearly sense the madness and desire in the man's eyes. No researcher would let go of the opportunity to uncover the greatest secrets of the entire universe, even if they knew that what awaited them in the end was very likely to be an eternal disappearance that was worse than death. "That's right." The man nodded seriously. "I've already stored everything you need in the recorder. You can use the knowledge stored inside to fulfill your dreams and ambitions. But before we part, I have to remind you that it's better not to underestimate your other self. The tree of chaos he created is a very, very dangerous weapon. I'm not even sure what kind of effect this weapon will have on you once it's completed." "Oh, that tree is really that scary?" The initiator raised his eyebrows in surprise. "Very scary. He used a method I've never seen before, blocking and seizing the connection between the master and the string at the root. It's like completely separating a person's body and soul. Both can exist independently, and their thoughts and actions will not be affected in any way." The man explained with interest. "You mean, he might have discovered some kind of hidden secret like us?" "I'm sorry. I can't give you a definite answer based on the information I've obtained. But there's one point. The success rate of your plan is still not 100%. So my suggestion is that you don't rush to find him. First, try the soul fragment you've stored. Perhaps you'll find something unexpected. Finally, goodbye, my friend. I hope we'll meet again one day." As the last word fell, the bespectacled man jumped into the white pillar of light without hesitation. The next second, the pillar of light seemed to be affected by some mysterious force. It began to grow thicker, thicker, until all the chaos in the surroundings was swallowed up. When the blinding white light gradually disappeared, the initiator discovered that the universe that had fallen into chaos had returned to normal. The only difference was that all the celestial bodies and dimensions in the entire star field had disappeared. The enormous gravitational force had collapsed to form an unprecedented black hole, continuously absorbing matter and energy from the surroundings. Fortunately, the black hole wasn't much of a threat to the master. The initiator didn't expend much effort. He took the recorder and left this dangerous place. He wasn't sure when the masters of the Order Parliament would suddenly appear and use all means to eliminate this traitor. He only wanted to do one thing now, and that was to find a hidden place to read the information on the recorder from beginning to end. Then he would surpass everyone and become the most powerful, intelligent life form in the material universe. However, What the initiator didn't know was that not long after he left, the beetle-shaped Gru appeared around the black hole out of thin air. He muttered to himself in shock. What happened here? Such a powerful gravitational force can't be natural. Someone created it. And what's with this strange sense of danger? No, I have to send this information back quickly. Chapter 1181. In fact, the sudden appearance of such a huge black hole couldn't be hidden from any of the rulers, especially the Order Parliament, who witnessed the appearance of the light pillar and void. They quickly sent out a large number of people to investigate and research the core of the black hole, trying to figure out what exactly happened after they left. After all, in their records, there was no precedent of a material universe returning to normal after being devoured by the void. And now, there was actually the first case. What did the initiator and his accomplices discover in this taboo research? Would this discovery pose a threat to every ruler? What ulterior motives did they have? With countless questions, the Order Parliament, one of the three strongest organizations in the material universe, seemed to have gone mad. They didn't care about the possible consequences and even moved their base to the side of the black hole so that they could observe and research at a close distance. Such a blatant and undisguised action instantly raised the vigilance of the rulers of the Chaos faction. For a moment, they fell into an endless debate. Some felt that this was an opportunity to launch an attack. Even if they couldn't obtain a complete victory, they could seize the initiative. There were also some who felt that this was a conspiracy and that the Order Parliament must be secretly plotting something big. Finally, there were a few who felt that the sudden appearance of the huge black hole was a little strange and that they should figure this out first. Gru sighed helplessly at the sight of his allies, who were always quarreling but rarely coming to a conclusion. Then, he left the meeting room silently. It couldn't be helped. Rulers who worshiped chaos were like this. They hated rules and restrictions and had long been used to doing their own things. They would never be able to form a powerful and executive organization like the Order Parliament. With a head full of doubts, Gru once again came to the room on the top floor of the Magic Tower. He directly said to Zhang Cheng, who was sitting on a chair, "Not long ago, an unprecedentedly huge black hole suddenly appeared in the universe. I believe you've noticed it, right?" "Of course. Unless I'm blind. How could I not notice it?" Zhang Cheng smiled and shrugged. "Then what do you think of this?" Gru immediately asked. "Nothing. To be exact, I have no interest. No matter what happens in the universe, as long as I complete the weapon step by step, nothing can threaten me," Zhang Cheng answered casually. As someone who hated prophecies and prying into time, his perception was much weaker than most sovereigns. He didn't know what shocking things had happened before the black hole formed. He also didn't know that his other self had already peeked into the ultimate mystery of the entire universe. "All right, since you're not interested in this information, there's another one. Do you still remember your old friend? He had already betrayed the Order Council and had even done something taboo. I seriously suspect that the black hole that appeared out of nowhere must have something to do with him." Gru threw out a bombshell without hesitation. "Oh, did the initiators do it?" Zhang Cheng's eyes suddenly shot out a terrifying light. Gru shook his head lightly. "I'm not 100% sure, but the possibility is very high. As I said before, he and his friend have been secretly conducting taboo research. Perhaps the black hole's sudden appearance is due to some major progress in their research. Hee. Does that mean he'll come looking for me soon?" The corners of Zhang Cheng's lips curled up slightly, revealing a playful smile. "I don't know, but you'd better be careful. A black hole of that scale isn't something that ordinary abilities or weapons can create." Gru couldn't help but remind him. "Don't worry, after a short period of time, I'll be able to make the Tree of Chaos appear in its complete form. At that time, no matter who comes looking for trouble, they'll have to pay a heavy price for their foolishness and recklessness." Having said that, Zhang Cheng raised his head and glanced at the magnificent scene of countless believers kneeling and praying in front of a huge statue in the magic mirror. As the Dark Goddess had performed a miracle in front of everyone, it had only been a few months since countless mortals had begun to chant her holy name and offer up their devout faith. The enormous divine power that was almost about to materialize continuously gathered in the sky and was finally transmitted back to the god's body to create a kingdom that belonged solely to the god. It could be said that as time passed, Mao Sha was becoming more and more powerful, and her influence on this planet was also increasing by the day. She was almost at the point where she could use her divine power to defy the laws of nature. As long as she was willing to pay a sufficient price, she could even change the direction of the planet, turning night and day completely upside down and changing the laws of the four seasons. There was no doubt that this was the benefit of being the only god. On this planet, there was no other god that could compete with her for believers and influence on the world. While the Dark Goddess was immersed in her great power, she didn't realize that everything was going according to the script that had been drawn up. When her power was enough to dominate the world, she would discover that the core of this planet had long been firmly occupied by the Tree of Chaos. Unless she swallowed the fruit at the top of the Tree of Chaos, she would never be able to break the shackles around her body. But once she swallowed the fruit, she would be forced to become one with the Tree of Chaos, injecting a soul into this terrifyingly powerful weapon. That's right, this was Zhang Cheng's ultimate plan. He would use a goddess who controlled all the beliefs on this planet to complete the final puzzle piece of the Tree of Chaos. The instant faith, divine power, and chaos merged into one, he would release the true power he had obtained from the main string, an ability that would make every ruler tremble in fear. She's the most important chess piece in your plan. Gru had undoubtedly discovered something. He stared at the magic mirror and carefully probed. Yes, look at her. She's so beautiful, so enchanting, and filled with a rebellious spirit. I'm looking forward to her reaction when she discovers the truth after all this is over. It will definitely be very, very interesting. Zhang Cheng didn't try to deny anything and openly admitted it. Because the plan had reached this stage, there was no need to hide anything anymore. Anyone who wasn't blind could see that the goddess was getting stronger day by day. Connecting it to the previous performance of the Tree of Chaos, it wasn't difficult to guess her fate. All right, please continue to do what you need to do. I will continuously send you the latest news. In short, before your weapon is completed, I will keep an eye on this planet. As you wish. Chapter 1182. Great Dark Goddess, please bestow your grace and save my poor child. Praise you, Supreme Ruler of Darkness. Please allow me to offer you a sacrifice in exchange for your generous reward. Power. Please bestow me power. Your humble believer needs help. Listening to the prayers echoing in her mind day and night, Mao Sha rubbed her eyebrows slightly, a trace of exhaustion appearing on her beautiful and mysterious face. Although she had already become a god for some time, she still hadn't fully adapted and would often be annoyed by the endless voices. Of course, this kind of exhaustion was not so much mental as psychological. After all, she had only become a god for a short period of time, and this world had never given birth to a real god before. There was no experience to learn from, and everything had to be slowly explored by herself. But all of this was worth it. In just a few months, the number of mortals praying to the Dark Goddess had exceeded several million. Even if some countries had explicitly prohibited the preaching of the teachings of the Dark Church in public, there were still many people spontaneously organizing themselves and secretly spreading it along one transportation hub after another. Perhaps it wouldn't be long before those shrines worshipping false gods would lose the support of the people and eventually decline and disappear. But this wasn't the most important thing. The most important thing was that for the first time, she felt the power of a god. That kind of difference between a god and a mortal was simply indescribable. She even secretly rejoiced that she had taken the initiative to kill the original god of darkness before he had time to absorb the power of faith. Otherwise, once the other party started to reform believers on a large scale, then with a mere holy sword, the result would be completely opposite. Power. I need more power. Only by obtaining enough power will I have the qualifications to challenge that guy. The newborn Dark Goddess muttered to herself while staring at the portrait hanging on the wall. The person in the portrait was none other than Zhang Cheng. There was no doubt that in her mind, This mysterious person who had always been firmly in control of her fate was the biggest threat, the opponent she needed to defeat the most. Just as she was staring at the portrait and slightly lost in thought, she suddenly felt some kind of strong throbbing in the depths of her heart, as if there was a voice calling her name. Without any hesitation, she immediately obeyed the call and left the god's kingdom that had just been created, which still looked very rough, and directly appeared in the depths of the earth's core. In an instant, an unbelievably spectacular scene appeared before his eyes. One after another, extremely thick tree roots pierced deeply into the scorching earth's core and extended outwards, continuously drawing energy from it. No matter how hot the surrounding crimson lava was, it was unable to harm the tree roots in the slightest. As a goddess who had seen the tree of chaos with her own eyes, Mao Sha immediately realized that this was the root of the towering tree. It had already fused closely with the planet. Any attack that attempted to harm the tree of chaos would directly cause the planet's core to be severely damaged. It could even cause the entire planet to collapse and shatter into countless small pieces. Damn it. So this is the reason why I've been so nervous recently. That bastard actually seized the authority of the entire world without a sound. Mao Sha stared at the astonishing energy transmitted through the roots and cursed while gnashing her teeth. She couldn't believe that her plan had failed before it even started. What to do? How could he destroy the tree of chaos without damaging the core of the planet? The dark goddess couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Before she could come up with an idea, she suddenly heard a low voice reverberating in her ears. Come find me. I can give you an answer. Who are you? Mao Sha vigilantly looked around, trying to find the source of the voice. He. Don't you remember me? That helpless little girl in the dream? The low voice let out a string of unclear laughter. When Mao Sha heard this sentence, her expression changed greatly. She suddenly released an astonishing amount of divine power and shouted loudly, "In the name of the dark goddess, don't pretend to be mysterious. Get out here. It seems that you're even more fragile than you look. Do you know? The weakness hidden in the depths of your heart won't disappear after you become a god. Come, awaken your dusty memories, and then come find me. You know where I am." As the last word left his mouth, the strange voice suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if it had never appeared. Awaken my memories? My head hurts. The dark goddess seemed to have received some kind of stimulation. With a plop, she knelt down in the scalding earth, her face full of pain. Fortunately, things like magma were similar to bathing water for gods. It wouldn't cause any harm, and even the clothes on her body weren't ignited. After an unknown amount of time, perhaps a few hours, perhaps a few days, when Mao Sha stood up again, there was a strange light in her eyes. She muttered to herself, "So that's how it is. That wasn't a simple dream at all, but a forgotten memory from my mortal nature that hasn't been abandoned. Now, I know where you are." The next second, she directly passed through the thick crust and appeared on the crown of the tree of chaos out of thin air. She pursed her lips and said to the only fruit hanging on the branch, "It's you. You weaved that dream when I became a god." "Ah, that's right. You finally recalled it. How do you feel after getting rid of that weak and petty self of yours?" Islands, who had become a fruit, asked with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Very bad, because you peeped into the depths of my heart while I was unconscious. Tell me, what exactly are you? Why do you have such a powerful mind power?" The dark goddess' face was somewhat gloomy. She had always been conceited. Never in her wildest dreams would she have thought that she would unconsciously expose the secret hidden in the depths of her heart, and the object of exposure was such a strange fruit. Ha! Who am I? As you can see, I am a fruit born from this tree of chaos, one of the greatest creations of Master. To a certain extent, I represent the will of this planet itself. Alans laughed and said part of the truth. As for the other part, even he was kept in the dark. Only Zhang Cheng, who was hiding behind the scenes and plotting everything, knew and would never tell anyone. Chapter 1183. Mom, where are you? Dad, save me. It's so dark here. I'm scared. No, don't come here. Don't come here. Please, no matter who it is, save me. Every time she recalled that dusty memory of her childhood, as well as the incomparably realistic reappearance of a dream, Mao Sha couldn't help but tremble all over, even though she was now the dark goddess through and through. If for most people, the fear left behind from childhood would be like a shadow that would accompany them for life, then for her, that memory was like a pain that was branded in her soul. Every time she recalled it, she would feel a heart-wrenching torture that wouldn't dissipate for a long time. What? You saw that terrifying scene of despair reappear, didn't you? Island sensed something through his powerful spiritual power, and his tone revealed a hint of mockery. Shut up. You don't understand what I went through at all. Mao Sha roared loudly with her two terrifying eyes. You don't know? No, I know everything. Your despair, your fear, your favor from the darkness, all of it happened because of that incident. Since then, your personality has changed greatly. You're no longer that lovable and well-behaved girl. You call yourself a believer of darkness, constantly spreading darkness, fear, and death. Islands replied meaningfully. For him, who had weaved complex dreams, he had almost spied on all of her secrets, including the most hidden, the most awkward, the most shameful, and even the parts that she didn't want to recall. Bastard, I told you to shut up. Didn't you hear me? The dark goddess flew into a rage out of humiliation and suddenly released a terrifying divine power attack, wanting to crush the fruit hanging on the branch into pieces. Unfortunately, this divine power, which was enough to destroy a city, was absorbed by the thick trunk of the chaos tree as soon as it left her body. It didn't even cause the wind to blow. There was no doubt that within the range of the chaos tree's influence, any form of energy attack would be absorbed and transformed into another form to be stored. Whether it was gods, magic, or the energy weapons used by those super civilizations, none of them could harm this giant tree in the slightest. Admiring the shocked expression on her face, Islands could not help but chuckle and tease her. What? You want to show off your goddess's might in front of Master's greatest creation? I'm sorry, but that's impossible. Even you were created by Master. No, I wasn't created by him. Every decision I've made, every step he took, it was my own choice. Mao Sha roared emotionally. Well, if you insist, then I have nothing to say. But before you deny it, please calm down and think carefully. How did you obtain the sacred sword? How did you know the name of the ancient god of darkness? How did you awaken him and then kill him to replace him? Islands reminded with a sneer. Ever since his memory had been completely erased, he had completely accepted his current identity and the fact that he possessed the fruit of wisdom. He was actively engaged in his own work. It had to be said that as a tool, he had worked hard without any complaints. He had played almost 200% of his role. Now he was about to complete the last step of his huge plan, which was to lure the dark goddess in front of him to swallow him. Mao Sha did not realize that her psychological defenses were wavering or even collapsing. She gritted her teeth and retorted, I admit it. Those were all traps set by him. But I didn't fall into them. Instead, I walked a path that belonged to me. My fate is controlled by me. Time will eventually prove this. Time? Please believe me, you don't understand what time is. Forget it. I don't want to argue with you about these meaningless things. Now, tell me, after seeing those tree roots that reached deep into the Earth's core, were you very shocked? Alan suddenly changed the topic. What do you mean? Mao Sha subconsciously forced herself to calm down and asked with a frown. That's exactly what it means. I believe that as a god, you must be very eager to destroy the chaos tree and then seize control of this world's source, right? Islands openly exposed the dark goddess's little thoughts. No god could resist the temptation of controlling a world alone. Even if there were gods everywhere in a world like Toril, and there was a god above gods suppressing the complicated situation, it was still the same. First, the three death gods stole the fate tablet, and then the mad god Sirik proclaimed himself as the only supreme god. Behind all this, wasn't it to get rid of all the competitors and enjoy the pleasure of controlling the entire world? If the selfishness of mortals was a manifestation of primitive desires, then the selfishness of gods was the purest of beliefs. They wanted the entire world to operate according to the ideal state in their minds. He knows what I want to do. Mao Sha's pupils is suddenly contracted. Of course he knows. Everything that happens in this world can't be hidden from Master. Whether it's your ambition, your desires, or your rebellious heart, Master knows everything. But he doesn't care. He even hopes that you will challenge him one day and add some spice to his boring life. Islands replied without hesitation. He will finally pay the price for his arrogance one day. The dark goddess clenched the holy sword in her hand that had been completely modified by the dark divine power, her tone revealing a strong sense of unwillingness and resentment. Perhaps, but Master's strength is far beyond your imagination. Do you think that you can break free from his control by becoming a god, or even defeat him? Too naive. You need strength, truly powerful strength. Islands tempted with a slightly low voice. Truly powerful strength? Mao Sha's eyes lit up slightly. Yes, truly powerful strength. Do you still remember what I said just now? The Tree of Chaos is one of Master's greatest creations, and I am the fruit of this tree's condensation of energy from the depths of the Earth's core. Anyone who eats me will be able to obtain an endless amount of power from the Tree of Chaos, a power that is enough to harm Master. After so much foreshadowing, Islands finally revealed his true goal at this moment. However, the Dark Goddess obviously didn't believe him so easily. She still carefully probed. Why are you telling me this? Because Master needs you to become even more powerful. He is too lonely, too bored, and always craves excitement. And on this planet, the only one who can bring him this kind of excitement is you. Don't worry, you have enough time to think about it. At least before I'm eaten by another person, you still have a chance to choose. Chapter 1184. Power. I need power. Incomparably powerful power. After leaving the Tree of Chaos, this voice reverberated in Mao Sha's mind. It was as if there was a demon whispering and tempting her. She believed that if her will showed even the slightest bit of weakness, she would immediately swallow that dangerous fruit without hesitation. Of course, it was not that she did not desire power, but that she did not quite believe the words of a fruit with the ability to think independently. Ever since she realized that there was a problem with her memory during the process of becoming a god, she had always suspected that someone had secretly tampered with it. Thus, she had a strong sense of vigilance against anything related to Zhang Cheng. Although swallowing the fruit of the Tree of Chaos and becoming the supreme ruler of this planet was very tempting, she had to be alive to enjoy it. After returning to the throne of the Divine Kingdom, the newly born Dark Goddess hid herself in a cloud of thick black fog. No one knew what she was thinking. Only the souls of the believers who came here after their deaths were still fanatically singing hymns praising the gods. They had no idea what was going on in this world. In fact, it is the height of stupidity and ignorance to entrust one's spiritual world, at any time and in any place, to something concrete, be it a god or something else. This was because this behavior meant that they had given up independent thinking, gave up doubting the spirit and self-transcendence. Instead, they had entrusted everything to a life form that was superior to them. Over time, the entire civilization system would fall into a long period of stagnation and no longer develop in a higher direction. Religion was a kind of mental anesthetic to fools. They vented the pain, helplessness, and stress in their lives by talking to the gods, thus ensuring that they would not easily destroy the existing social order, no matter how backward and cruel this order was. However, to smart people, religion was a tool that could be used to amass wealth, control thoughts, and make the exploited and abused people at the bottom think that all of this was the arrangement of fate. Just as the Dark Goddess was deep in thought, in a remote border town, two women exuding amazing charm were sitting in front of a seat, staring at each other without blinking. After a full minute, Vilya smiled and greeted them. "Good afternoon, daughter of the respected Harrison. I'm very happy that you could come here to meet me. I'm also very honored to receive your invitation, Your Majesty. Another queen stroked her long golden hair and took the initiative to stand up and bow. Although on the surface, both of them were monarchs of the same country, the former, who held great power, was obviously more powerful than the latter. According to the common diplomatic rules, when there was a huge gap in strength between two countries, the weaker party had to be the first to salute the stronger party as a sign of respect. This was just like how the head of state of a weaker country would always take the initiative to shake hands in diplomatic situations on Earth. Then let's cut the crap. Let's talk openly and honestly. After the two of them finished a friendly exchange of greetings, Vilya immediately went straight to the point. She unfurled a scroll filled with tiny words and said in a playful tone, "This is a treaty signed by the 6 kings recently. They have also sent me an invitation. Did you agree?" The latter glanced at the words on the scroll and could not help but laugh. "No, I didn't. I'm not a fool, and I'm not stupid enough to think that I can rely on the army to become an enemy of a country blessed by God." Vilya did not try to hide anything and openly said what she thought. To be precise, she was the only monarch in the surrounding countries who did not use administrative and military means to suppress the expansion of the Dark Church. As for the remaining fellows who were accustomed to being aloof and bossy, they basically didn't understand what a real god meant. They were frightened by the snowball, like terrifying expansion speed of the Dark Church. They unceasingly arrested those who tried to preach. Some of them even held public burning at stake just to intimidate the people and ensure that when they decided to believe, they would carefully consider whether it was worth it or not. Then, what do you want to talk about? Or what do you want from me? The queen, who was known as Harrison's daughter, crossed her arms in front of her chest, and a strange light flashed in her eyes. It must be known that the title Harrison's daughter was not used casually. It was a kind of hint, a kind of sarcasm, thinking that she was temporarily not worthy of being crowned with the title of king. However, compared to the titles of patricide, vicious daughter, femme fatale, and so on, Harrison's daughter was quite mild. At least, it recognized her innate right of inheritance in terms of bloodline. There was no doubt that Vilya wanted to show off her power to this young peer and then firmly occupy the initiative in the following negotiations. Unfortunately, the other party did not seem to care too much about this kind of belittling and provocation. She still maintained a polite smile, and there was not even a hint of anger. "It's not what I want, but what you are willing to pay. Do you know? In fact, I have many choices, but you only have 2 choices." Vilya obviously did not want to be the one to reveal her trump card first, so she continued to exert psychological pressure. "Hee, you are really cunning. Well, who told me to be the weaker party? My conditions are very simple. Sign a treaty and let the Church of Darkness become the only legal religion in the kingdom. In return, the Dark Goddess will protect you and your family. Even if we meet on the battlefield in the future, the Dark Goddess will not side with either side." As the young queen spoke, she gave a look to the servant behind her. The servant understood and hurriedly took out the treaty that he had prepared beforehand and placed it on the table. "That's all." Vilya purposely frowned and pretended to be dissatisfied. In fact, just the fact that the Dark Goddess would not interfere in the struggles of mortals was enough to satisfy her. "Your Majesty, you have 1/3 of the empire that my father, Harrison, built with his own hands in your hands. What else do you want? Moreover, with the support of the Dark Goddess, you can completely turn the spearhead and declare war in the name of religion on those countries that persecute the Church's preaching, right? Then what about you? What are you going to do next?" "Me? Of course I am going to have a good talk with my brothers and sisters and let them realize who is the true successor of my father. In that case, I will sign this treaty. By the way, I hope that you can defeat all the competitors as soon as possible and restore the glory of the great Lion of Orlos." "Thank you." Chapter 1185. A treaty? Interesting. Looks like they've already chosen a direction. A war that will engulf half the continent is about to begin. Zhang Cheng's lips curled into a playful smile as he looked at the images transmitted back from the magic mirror. As entertainment to pass the time, as well as a test of his strength, the natives of this planet had been fully utilized. Their wisdom, their lives, their blood and souls. They had completely become the nourishment for Zhongcheng's growth. In particular, the tree of chaos that was constantly assimilating with the entire planet had unknowingly affected countless young children, causing them to become temperamental and completely different from their parents. There was no doubt. Chaos was expanding. It was constantly transforming the environment of this planet, be it internally or externally. Just as Zhang Cheng shifted his gaze to another mirror, intending to see what Kerwin's remaining subordinates were doing, a familiar voice suddenly reverberated in his mind. "Master, I've already tempted the Dark Goddess according to your request. However, she seems to be somewhat vigilant and hesitant. She hasn't taken any actual action." There was no need to ask to know that this voice belonged to Islands, who had turned into the fruit of chaos. "Oh, she's still observing?" Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and asked with interest. He had always been extremely interested in Mao Sha, who was full of uncertainty. This was because he saw some of the characteristics that he possessed when he was still a mortal in this woman. For example, she was bold, unwilling to bow down to fate, rebellious, and never feared a power stronger than herself. "I'm sorry, Master." She sealed off her heart and thoughts. "I don't know what she's thinking." Islands explained helplessly. "No, it's all right. It's not your fault." Zhang Qing shook his head with a smile. "Don't worry. She'll make the right choice. Do you remember what I told you before? If a person is unwilling to make a choice, then set up a trap and force them to make a choice." "You mean?" Islands obviously realized something, and his tone revealed a strong excitement. "The reason she's still observing is that no competitor has appeared yet. So we have to create a competitor out of thin air, a threat." Zhang Cheng gave a meaningful answer. "Create a competitor? I understand now." After receiving an affirmative answer, Islands' mental power disappeared without a trace. About 10 minutes later, a seriously ill young man who was lying on a dirty wooden plank waiting for death suddenly opened his eyes and jumped up. He stared at his body that had recovered its health and vitality and muttered to himself in disbelief, How is this possible? That dream was actually real. Oh my God, Jim, you've recovered?" Another beggar struggled to get up from the ground, his face full of surprise. "Of course, not only have I recovered from my illness. Furthermore, he had received an oracle. Quick, follow me. We must leave this city before nightfall." The young man called Jim didn't say anything. He grabbed his friend and ran outside. His movements were so agile and strong that the other beggar didn't even have a chance to break free. Not long after, they disappeared into the depths of the dense forest in the direction of the last rays of the setting sun. Run without stopping. He didn't know why, but Jim felt as if he had endless stamina. No matter how much he ran, he wouldn't get tired, nor would he feel tired or hungry. He finally stopped when the moon was high in the sky. He stared at the ruins hidden between vines and shrubs not far in front of him. As for the beggar who was being dragged, he was already out of breath and fell to the ground with a plop. He gasped for air and couldn't believe that he was still alive after running for such a long time. "Well, where's this place? Also, what's with your superhuman strength and stamina?" He raised his head and asked his friend who had suddenly become a stranger. "I don't know. I don't understand. Just trust me." Jim helped his friend who couldn't hold on any longer and slowly walked toward the circular stone platform in the middle of the ruins. Against the bright moonlight, one could vaguely see that the platform was densely carved with countless shining runes. Without any hesitation, he bit his finger with his teeth and dripped his blood into the groove in the center of the stone platform. In the blink of an eye, under the stimulation of the dark red blood, a bright light descended from the sky and enveloped the two young men. Warmth, comfort. There was also an indescribable sense of security. When the light slowly weakened and dissipated, the two youths no longer looked like dirty beggars. Instead, they revealed an indescribable, mysterious temperament. Their eyes, in particular, carried a trace of supreme majesty. We are now God's chosen." Looking at the beautiful white silk robe on his body, the beggar youth's voice trembled. He couldn't help but tremble. Every time he heard the voice echoing in his ears, he had a strong feeling that it was unreal. In contrast, Jim was much calmer and nodded seriously. That's right. We are now going to follow the oracle and awaken the great moon god. This is both an opportunity and a mission. Come, my friend, from today onwards, our destiny has changed. We don't have to starve anymore, and we won't be bullied by the gangs anymore. Of course not. Could it be that you haven't felt the powerful strength in your body? That is a generous gift from God. That's great. I really can't believe that lowly beggars like us would one day be favored by God. Just as the two youths were excitedly discussing what to do next, Islands, who was at the top of the tree of chaos, couldn't help but laugh sarcastically. Destiny? God? No. Children, you are just insignificant chess pieces of master. Now, go and do what you need to do. The great dark goddess needs a little stimulation to make the right choice. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately turned his attention to the east of the continent. In fact, it wasn't just one or two cases of similar things happening at the same time. Although a true god had never been born on this planet before, there were many gods who were about to be awakened. Now, he was going to use those ignorant people to awaken these gods one by one. He wanted to see if the dark goddess would continue to wait patiently or jump out to kill all the competitors and eagerly swallow the fruit of the Tree of Chaos. Wonderful Book House.